Hello and welcome back to Link to the Cast, your weekly dose of video games and nerd culture ephemera, available everywhere good podcasts are sold. I'm your party host, Dave Ryan. We got the full complement this week. It's party time. First, platforming prodigy, Mark Robinson. Mark, you looked quite wrapped up there.
Look, I mean, not to kind of take a rant on the weather like some embittered old man, but the weather has been pretty fucking diabolical the last couple of weeks in this country. But I am good. I'm very well.
Joining us as well, the man with one Sidona can burning a hole in his pocket as we speak. It's Jack Lazell. Jack, how are you?
Yeah, I just think it's funny that we've sat here like actual adult humans for 20 minutes. I had a proper conversation like about some wide variety of topics. And the first thing you start off with was, oh, the old weather, eh? When we just launched into the podcast there. It's just like the awkward start of every Teams call meeting I have at work. What's it like outside today? Well, you never know. Do you just get into that sort of business mode and then that just sort of that mindset takes over, Dave?
Is it worse than is the weather small talk at the start of a Zoom call better or worse than, do you know, when for the 2 years we were locked in, everyone feeling obliged to comment on the lockdown every time they're on a Zoom call? Oh, it's not the same as in person, really, is it? Can't wait to get back out there. Oh.
I think so. Our method of getting around that was just like, oh, what's everyone been watching? Just because that was just such a more fun question. Yeah. You know, as people were like plowing through old sitcoms and Tiger King and all of that jazz.
Rounding us off, a man who didn't have a quiet week, it's the transatlantic terror himself, Garrett Kidney. Garrett, you just flew back home and boy, your arms are tired.
You can't call me transatlantic terror. Now I will be able to like fly back across the Atlantic. They'll be like, on this podcast, you were called a transatlantic terror. We cannot let you on this plane.
I would like to thank all members of the TSA for the clicks.
I'm always worried because like I'm going to Canada on work. So I'm always slightly worried when you're like, oh, what's the nature of your direct visit? And I have like a letter from the company and everything to show them so that it's very official and you can travel on work. I'm still like, please don't kick me out. Please just let me in your country. Please don't cause me any hassle.
Yeah, but it's not like if you were going there for a holiday, they'd kick you out either, mate, to be honest.
Then I'm contributing to their economy as opposed to taking money out of their economy by working.
I did appreciate the first time I went to travel to North America, and I always thought this was a bit that people did about the TSA for like stand-up comedy purposes. Didn't realize it was real, that like on your questionnaire when you go over there through customs first time, they genuinely do ask you, have you ever been involved in a plot to overthrow the American government?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that they're like, you did any crimes? You bring any drugs with you? Everyone's like, oh, damn it. I have to answer this honestly. They got me.
I'm not going to take credit for it because it was definitely a stand-up that said it first, but it's just like who is the one person that's going to catch out? It's like, have you ever been a member of a terrorist organization? Yes. Fuck.
Yeah. Was it, I want to say it was Dara Breen.
Yeah, it sounds like a Dara thing.
I in the back of my head, if I was there and I was asked that question, it just in the back of my head I'd be screaming, it's like, you know, you got plenty in your own country at the moment that want to do that. Like, you don't need to worry about me.
Because Mark, I'm sure getting quippy with the TSA is absolutely the way to get into the country.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I think you should be cleaning your own house, sir.
Can we begin a conversation about white supremacy, sir? Which I'm sure will go down well with the TSA.
May I interest you in this mirror, sir?
Can we start a Mark Gets Political 5-minute segment on each show, please?
This is what we get when we can't let him talk about the weather. He just immediately goes to political commentary.
He has to suffer the weather because he gives so much shit to passport control wherever he travels, and he's just stuck in Ireland now.
Yeah, they won't let him out anymore.
Yeah. Tell us about Canada, Garrett.
Yeah, where is it?
It's big.
What is this country?
Did you have time to do some sightseeing? Did you enjoy some fine foods that our Canadian friends had to offer? What was the trip like, work aside?
Well, to answer Jack's question, it's fucking humongous, Canada.
Oh, I know, it's huge, isn't it? It's bigger than America.
Like, when you're flying in, you're like, okay, I've cleared the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
We're in the home stretch, and then you look at the map on the screen, it's like, no, still 2 fucking hours left. Just getting over the eastern part of Canada as far as Toronto. Yeah. It's still 2 more hours. It's like, God, why is your country so big? Why do you have so much land?
It's always given me Australia vibes, in as much as lots of really nice cities separated by fathomless levels of inhospitable territory.
I flew from Toronto to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and that was 5 hours.
Dramatic pause.
That's like the middle of the country, and that's a 5 hour fucking flight.
Yeah.
And you still got like another 2 hours, I think you could fly, maybe a little bit less, before you would hit Vancouver, like you'd hit the West Coast. It's mad.
There is no point in Ireland from which you could even drive 5 hours without ending up underwater.
But I didn't have much because I had 3 days in Toronto, then headed down to Windsor, everyone's favorite part of Canada, which is right next to Detroit, which is funny because you can literally look across the river in Windsor and you see Detroit on the other side. It's like, look, it's America from a distance. Ideal. So I didn't have much. The only like outing I went to see Tedeschi Trucks Band. Not very good. I've no idea because they were on a like 4,000 seat venue, and I haven't heard of them. And anybody I've mentioned Tedeschi Trucks Band to also hasn't heard of them. They're like a blues rock band. Apparently, they're very good at instruments. They play instruments good even if they have zero notable songs. Like all of their songs, you were like, all right, I can commend you as musicians. You can undeniably play into these instruments very well. Songwriting skills, absolutely nothing there. I'm sorry, guys.
You should let them know that what you said there, so they can use that as the pull quote for their concerts. They are good at instruments.
But that's the thing. That's the thing with blues rock music, is that it's all based around the same form and structure. And so it's just a bunch of people who can play instruments very well, but there's like one song to play 20 times over. That is like the kind of fundamental issue with blues with me.
They are also doing like rock blues, which like if I'm going to go see a blues concert, I want to see the depression in your eyes. That's the whole point of blues. I want the sadness. I don't want like upbeat rock with a little bit of blues.
I am now learning, because I Googled them while you were talking, and I was like, oh, that's an unusual name. I wonder why they have that name. And it's because they are formed by the duo of Susan Tedeschi and Derek Trucks, which is a great name.
Derek Trucks, yes.
And there are 12 members of this band.
The best part might have been Ziggy Marley opened for them.
What?
Oh, wow.
But he did not do the Arthur theme, so I was absolutely raging.
And he didn't even see your sign to that effect.
I nearly shouted "Do Arthur" at the man. So
I wonder how often he gets that. Someone just shouts like a lowly voice in the back, "Do Arthur!"
I hope he gets it at every concert because he's not doing it. It's his best song.
5 studio albums. They've had 3 US top 20 albums.
Yeah, they're like a reasonably decent sized act. Just no one, I think, under the age of 55 has heard of them, and I only got tickets from somebody else because he didn't want them. So
yeah, you're speaking to the foremost music expert on this podcast. Yeah, never heard of them.
I also don't think anyone under the age of 50 is in the band. Just looking around at the.
But I think it's the thing with like the American, the US like charts, is that on this side of the Atlantic, there's so much of that like top 10, top 20, top 50 that we just have no idea exists, because I imagine so much of it is blues and country and
a
God
lot
knows what
of
else.
country.
And it's all very
I think
insular.
me and Jack get an insight into this because we watch Todd in the Shadows on YouTube, who does frequent like end of year rundowns of like the top 20 worst and best hit songs in the US that year. And fuck me, is there so much country. Fucking hell.
It does really well as well.
It makes dollar. Makes a lot of dollar.
The most notable thing is they're from Jacksonville, so I assume they're Tony Khan's favorite band.
Are they redneck fuckers?
Yeah.
Garrett's not going to get that reference.
I don't.
No, he's not. Yeah. Now, I tell you, it would have been the ultimate podcast payoff. He said, I went to a Limp Bizkit show while I was in Canada.
Oh my God.
Oh, fuck me.
In fairness. He would have had a great time.
You know, that's one thing I would definitely say. If you had gone to Limp Bizkit, you would have had a great time.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have given a shit. You wouldn't have listened to them anymore after that, but you would have had a great time.
The question is if he saw Limp Bizkit, would he still request for them to play Arthur?
Everyone should play Arthur. It's the best. It's a song about everyone coming together and getting over their differences to be friends. It's universal, broad appeal.
I would say there's a couple of Limp Bizkit songs that follow certain themes.
Are they also simple messages that come from the heart?
Yeah. Fred does.
Yeah, I guess. I guess Nookie does come from the heart in some ways.
You just don't want to wake up.
Yeah. We've hit our once a month quota of talking about Limp Bizkit as well, which I'm very happy
about. I talked about him on another podcast last week. I don't know how it keeps happening.
I don't know. Everything, all roads lead to Limp Bizkit.
There is There is one universal truth, and it is Fred Durst.
Right. Let's move quite nicely. Actually, did you have any poutine, Garrett?
I didn't. I had poutine last time I was there, and like, I don't know, it's
Poutine rocks.
gravy and chips with some cheese thrown in. You can't go wrong.
Right. Let's talk about what we've been watching. We'll kick off with you, Mark.
Hi there, how's it going? We got an animated double bill here as I watched, first of all, a film called Nimona, which I haven't heard a lot of chatter about, but I was just scrolling on Letterboxd like a week or 2 weeks ago, and I saw that it popped up on there, and so I started looking through some reviews, and people were like, hey, this film is really, really good, it's really worth checking out. So I was like, all right, we'll put this on then. For a little bit of kind of backstory in terms of the actual development of it, so this was originally Blue Sky Studios, which was under Disney, and it was meant to be released, I think it was like 2020, like just before the pandemic happened. But then the studio got shut down, and it's really interesting because this film is very like heavy in terms of its LGBTQ themes, both in terms of just its main characters and its kind of central theming. And it's interesting to think about what this film, in terms of its marketing and the reaction to it, which I think we can all kind of predictably guess what the sort of backlash to it would have been if Disney had released this. But yeah, it was meant to come out in 2020 by Blue Sky Studios, but Blue Sky got closed down. And then Annapurna, better known, I imagine, on this podcast for their publishing, games publishing house. They do have an Annapurna animation studio now. I don't know if it's a development studio or it's just a publishing house. But I believe this is the first film under that wing. And it stars Chloe Grace Moretz and Riz Ahmed, and the idea is that there's a knight who it's got a couple of different themes going on. There's definitely themes around being trans and being accepted, and a lot of things that are very kind of applicable and relevant to modern day society, sadly, in terms of getting to a place of being accepted. There's a little bit of kind of like political class commentary in here. The main character, the knight, he is... So it was like 1,000 years ago, a knight came to power and slayed a dragon, and then since then, like, the kind of descendants of that knight would become, the new knights that would protect society. But it was always done very insular, so no one from the outside, no one from like the working class or whatever could be part of this group. But one person was allowed to become a part of that, and during the coronation ceremony, he ends up killing the queen, but like he's framed for that murder, and so then he goes into exile. Him and his partner, and one of the things of this film is that he is gay, and there is a kiss that happens in this film. There's a gay kiss, and again, come back to like if this had been released by Disney or what that would have turned into, and I don't even want to think about it. And so the film kind of explores him trying to kind of deal with all of this. He then runs into a shape-shifting being that takes the form of a small woman, or a small girl, I guess, called Nimona, again voiced by Chloe Grace Moretz. And it's the kind of partnership between these two to get him to clear his name, but also for her, the relationship between those two, of him accepting this shape-shifting being, and then further on in terms of with society as well. And it's a really, really good film. It's a beautiful film. It's kind of like a sort of early 2000s cell shading video game effect, but kind of with a sort of 3D slash. It's got a little bit of the kind of Into the Spider-Verse sort of vibe going on with it as well. It does feel like its own thing. I think it's a really unique, visually unique looking film. But I think that it works in that, obviously, the themes that it addresses, it works on two fronts, in that I think it's a really, really good film regardless of those, but it's also a very, very good film because it addresses those in a way that is kind of, like delicate and sensitive about the way that it approaches it. It's based off of a webcomic. I learned about this after watching it. I don't know much about the webcomic, so I don't know how like kind of one-to-one it is with the source material, but I have to imagine that the webcomics kind of main themes would be around LGBTQ themes. And yeah, it's a really, really strong film. I'd say that if you're looking for something to kind of watch at the moment, it's a Netflix film. So, you know, if you've got Netflix, as apparently a lot more people do these days, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, this is my first time hearing about it, so.
Yeah, it's really just like, I don't know, like how, I guess if it's a Netflix release, then we ain't got to worry too much about in terms of how much money it's going to make, but
they certainly don't seem to worry about how much money they're making.
I'm surprised it weren't cancelled if it's a Netflix animation thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it got cancelled once, so I guess the biggest surprise is that it did get picked up again, but I'm happy it did. It's, yeah, definitely worth checking out. The other thing that I saw was the new Pixar Studios release, Elemental, which came out, what was this, last month, I want to say?
Yeah, it's been out a while.
Yeah, it's been out over a month or so. We've been planning to see it, but just didn't get around to it. But we went to the cinema last week to see it. And it's all right. Maria liked it more than I did. My biggest issue with this film is that it's trying to serve two masters here. There's very much for like the first sort of like quarter, maybe the first third of the film. It's really exploring like kind of issues around immigration and the kind of like resulting xenophobia / racism that can come from that. And you see it from the perspective of the element of fire. And you have a couple and their child that are they leave where they come from due to like a natural disaster, and they're forced to leave. They come to start a new life in this new town that is primarily run by water, earth, and wind. And you kind of see by the geography of the city that sort of fire has its own kind of section that's kind of to itself, and you can see that's slightly more working class, slightly more not dingy, but it feels more like a kind of local community, but you know, doesn't have access to the sort of resources and the way the buildings are kind of put together. It's a little bit more ramshackle, but it's their kind of place. And the first kind of third of the film sort of deals with that, and I think it does some really interesting things, and if it kind of stuck with that, I think we could have had like a really interesting perspective on that, even though the metaphor that they're using is quite ham-fisted and really kind of punching you with this
fire
metaphor.
And water, they don't mix. Oh!
Yeah, but I think that because when I saw the trailer for it, you clearly got the idea that, all right, this is just a rom-com, but we're using fire and water. So for the first third of the film, you're like, oh, actually, no, there's this immigration slant to it. It's not what I was expecting. The problem is that whole bit there only serves to it carries, or it's there just to lead into the actual rom-com section, which then leads the rest of the film, which is, while like the characters of Ember and Wade, the fire and water, the performances are decent enough, there's just not enough there. It's just very kind of by the numbers in terms of like there's one scene where Ember goes to meet Wade's family, and there's like that scene's pretty interesting and well done. But for the most part, there's nothing particularly interesting there, other than, you know, visually it's a gorgeous looking film. But you kind of feel a bit let down where it's going in one direction and then it bleeds straight into what you expect this film to be, and it's just not as interesting. And I was a little bit let down that just this whole immigration story plot was just there just to serve like this just lesser interesting sort of rom-com sort of thing. It's fine. It's, you know, it's kind of gentleman's 3. It's certainly not the worst Pixar film I've seen. I don't think it's going to crack, you know, like the top 10 for me.
Ember is, I guess, the route one.
Ember and Wave, yeah, it's like, come on. And like, I've been pretty high on some of the, like, I liked Soul. Soul's great. I love Luca. Luca's a phenomenal movie. Yeah. So, like, recent Pixar 100%. Has been pretty good. They've had Lightyear and stuff, which I haven't seen. But, like, recent Pixar has been pretty good. And then I saw, like, all the ads and trailers for this, and it's like, that's the most, like, 6, 7 out of 10 Pixar movie you'll ever see in your life, and I'll watch it on Disney Plus in, like, 4 months.
I think that
it's a real ham
timing of it as well. Like it feels like it was really sent out to die. Like it comes out right prior to like Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, And now, like, obviously Barbenheimer weekend, as Jack alluded to, like, it just, I don't think they had this didn't seem to be the one they had the most confidence in of late.
And there's like this weird narrative about Pixar in general where like they didn't put the Disney animation movies on Disney Plus during the pandemic, but they did put the Pixar movies on Disney Plus for free at launch. And there's a lot of talk about how like they have potentially devalued Pixar as a brand by doing that, by setting the expectation as Pixar is a thing you get with a subscription as opposed to something you go see in theaters. Yeah. So the idea that like one of the movies that this is a theatrical release, they're back to being a full theatrical Pixar release, and then it's like it's one of their less inspired movies. It's just like, well, maybe they want to justify putting these movies on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Interesting.
But I will say, like, visually, I mean, I was looking here, it was one of the most expensive animated films ever, and I get that, because I do think that if you were just to sit back, like, if you were just to watch this without the sound on and just look at it, like, it is sumptuous in terms of the world that is created, in terms of, like, because it's not just that, you know, these characters being animated, but, like, you look at the character of Ember, and the way that the flames, you know, you say like a frame of animation and like the physical movement of the character, but then on top of that, you've got the actual flames that are flickering within the frame as well. Like the amount of work that had to have gone into that, it's, you know, there's a real craft to this film in terms of its visuals. It's just, it is a shame that the story is kind of, as you say, it's very Route One in a lot of ways. And just, I guess, even more frustrating because you could see there was the potential there for like the first third. It was like, hey, they're sort of tackling something that is very kind of very topical, but like done in that sort of magical Disney Pixar sort of way. And it starts to go that way, and then it's like, nope, we have to bring it dragging, kicking and screaming back into sort of typical rom-com territory. So it's a shame, but again, it's a 6.5.
The trailer made it look so bang average as well.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing exciting about the trailer, and it has, like, pretty much no one in it that's, like, you know, they normally get, like, 1 or 2 people in a Pixar movie who are super famous, and they can at least, you know, sell it on the strength of, you know, X person is in this film, and it might bring in some audience, but the most famous person in it is Catherine O'Hara, and, like...
Yeah.
And I love Catherine O'Hara as much as the next guy, but I don't think that she's really bringing anyone into the theaters to go and see that. And I've heard almost no buzz about it. Like, aside from you just talking about it now, Mark, I've not heard a single person I talk to about movies or who I know regularly goes to the cinema go, oh, I went to go and check out Elemental. Like, it can't have done well.
No, it's kind of flopped. I know it started picking up a little bit of, pardon the pun, steam in the later weeks because water and fire, they make steam. But yeah, no, not a hope. It's been a pretty big flop.
If this film cost 200 million to make, it's not recouping, like, I'd say half of that.
In a world where, like, even Indiana Jones is getting eaten alive by the fucking Sound of Freedom QAnon movie, I don't have much hope for Elemental. Now,
the Sound of Freedom stuff is all astroturfed as well.
Yes, it is. Yeah, they're buying out whole theaters to pad those numbers. But I will say, if Elemental's leads were Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy together, then you're talking magic, baby. That's what you need.
Oh, I did see Indiana Jones. Anyone else see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about it. I know I talked about it on the Road Trip podcast. And Jack, you mentioned a little bit last week. What did you think of it, Garrett? And how did you feel about the Act 3 wackiness?
Oh, I love the Act 3 wackiness. I kind of wish the whole movie was that. I kind of wish like they just went absolutely insane a lot earlier, and like the whole movie was just that insane like twist at the end. I think I would have had more fun.
We could probably talk about it now. It's been a month since.
Yeah, it would have been amazing with Mads Mikkelsen if the whole movie he was just a time traveling Nazi going. It was like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, just going through different ages of evilness.
If they just jumped around a bunch of different time periods and you just get Harrison Ford in like ancient Greece and Rome and
if every period he jumped to, he was doing just let me die here.
Yeah, I just want to die.
Like, that's the happy ending of Indiana Jones, is him being really sad that he wasn't allowed to die.
It's like the middle of the Renaissance. He's on the Amalfi Coast and he's like, I should just die here. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like, look at this fucking shoreline and sunset. No, I must die now.
Yeah, that's okay. It is too long. Like, it could be 2 hours. It doesn't need to be 2.5.
It's definitely a lot better than the Crystal Skull, though.
Yeah, it's a good, solid adventure movie, which is what you want from Indiana Jones. It's not going to knock your socks off, but you'll be like, yeah, they played the theme song and he punches some Nazis.
Yeah, and I know, apparently, like, we were joking about that they'll just let me die here a bit at the end, but like, I thought Indiana Jones, the indie performance by Harrison Ford was pretty good. Like, it's the most effort I've seen him put into anything in a long time.
That man really wanted to die there.
Into Han Solo, to be fair.
I think it's he put a lot of effort into that Conan O'Brien podcast, in which he was spectacular.
He put more effort in the Conan podcast than he did in the indie movie. Dave.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably.
I don't think he punched any Nazis.
But just describe, Garrett, what it is. We've kind of danced around it. What the fuck is going on with the Act 3 of this movie?
Yeah, the whole movie it's Archimedes, isn't it? As I forget my Greek mathematician. So the whole movie is based around this thing Archimedes made that can give you the power of God. And it turns out the power of God is time travel. So at the end of the movie, they go through a time travel portal that Archimedes predicted that brings them back to ancient Greece, Archimedes' time, where they get to meet Archimedes in the middle of like a war and they're burning ships with mirrors. And Indiana Jones is just like, just leave me here. I just want to die on these shores of it's not Sicily, it's
Greece.
It's somewhere in Greece. I can't remember the city. Yeah, just leave me here to die. And Syracuse. Yes, it is Syracuse.
Because there is a dumb gag at the start about how not the Syracuse, because he's doing a lecture about it.
Yeah, and it comes full circle. Funny how that works. But yeah, like that silliness of just like, let's just go to ancient Greece. And like Indiana Jones, that's not like a dramatic jump for that franchise. It's had some supernatural stuff at the edges of it all, like through the history of it. So for them to just go like full on time travel, I'm so on board for it. I was like, oh, I wish like you went there in the first act and we just had just goofery for the whole thing. Nice little movie. It's a nice way to put a cap on it, which the fourth film wasn't. So. Yeah.
They put a cap on it by putting a cap in Shia LaBeouf. Perfect. What else have you seen?
So my other two are the classic plane movies. So there was an 80-year-old woman sitting next to me, and the first film I threw on within like 10 minutes of the flight starting was Scream 6.
Hell yeah.
And there's a scene with excessive stabbing in the very start of that movie.
In a Scream movie.
Like there's an amount of stabbing and then there's like a sheer excessive amount of stabbing. And she was just glancing over at my screen as I was watching it. It's like, I'm not some kind of sadist who gets off on this. I just happened to choose Scream, okay?
You should have like just looked her dead in the eye while it was happening.
Pull the Ghostface mask out of my bag and just like,
You better be fucking careful.
Other than that, like, I don't know, these movies are good. I think that's my only take. I think these movies are good. They're nothing special. They're not reinventing the wheel. But yeah, like these films they're just rock solid. I appreciate they get like the right amount of meta. And there's enough horror tropes constantly being created for them to subvert them in interesting ways. Yeah. And then otherwise, I thought like the core mystery, the third act wasn't great, but I think they set up some of the core mystery stuff pretty well. Good little Scream movie. I had a good time.
Yeah, they're fun. They're a bunch of fun. I feel like they're a great theater experience. I know that's not how you saw it, but like
no.
I saw, because I obviously like I love the first three, but I was much too young to be seeing those in the cinema. So I found like going to see these last two in the cinema was just a great time for like people around me, like getting the full gamut of like some people shrieking, some people laughing, people being just really fucking into it as a community experience was class. And yeah, I do love these were like meta movies before everybody was fucking meta. And
it's so funny, the idea that like Scream was the meta horror movie.
Yeah.
And then scary movie somehow spun off of like the meta horror movie. It's like, how do you do is like, we're going to do a meta horror movie.
Yeah, and so many horror movies and horror movie franchises now are obsessed with doing the meta thing, and still I don't think any one of them have like walked the line as well as Scream, because it's both like fun meta stuff and also like just a pretty damn good slasher movie franchise as well. I appreciate
how like all the meta stuff in this one is about like it's IP expansion era, baby. It's like that's good. That's good that there's plenty to mine there. And naturally, after watching Scream, I needed a palate cleanser, so I went to Babe. 1995's Babe.
Was this to win that woman beside you back?
I did start crying during this movie, so it's just like, oh, it's Babe. Because I don't think I've watched Babe since the 90s, at least not all the way through. And that was one of those films that, like, if you were a child in the 90s, you have seen Babe an unfathomable number of times.
Yeah.
Because that was one that, like, if you were in school and if you were in primary school at the time, it's the classic, like, we'll throw Babe on for like the end of the summer kind of thing, or I can't be bothered teaching. And it's always like, it was a big movie rotation here in Ireland over and over again. That's our famous Saturday evening movie slot where they'd show like a family movie, which still exists to this day. And like Babe was a staple of the big movie era.
In there with like Cool Runnings and Honey, I Shrunk the Kid. Lamb
Hocus
Before
Pocus.
Time, Casper.
All these movies that you would have seen to death. And so I don't think I'd watched Babe since like that year of my life. So I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch Babe. I'm going to enjoy Babe. Because there was a lame selection of movies. And I've seen a lot of them. But it's like, I'm not watching Black Adam. And I was like, oh, Renfield. But it's like, no, that's coming in August. It's like, damn it. I can't watch Renfield. So I delved into nostalgia, and like the whole film doesn't really hold up. It's not like a great full piece of entertainment. It's pretty like thrown together. Written by George Miller of all people, in case you didn't know that little tidbit.
Yeah.
Very strange that George Miller wrote
Babe, Happy Feet.
What a canon of work. But man, the final scene in Babe is one of those things that if you do not feel something at the end, you are a monster. Like the scene where he shepherds those sheep into that thing, and then there's like the dramatic pause. You hear the click of the gate, and you have the big swelling Babe theme before the delivery of "That'll Do, Pig, That'll Do" from James Cromwell. Like that last scene is just magic. It is movie making magic. It will make you cry on a plane from Toronto to London in front of an 80-year-old lady after you just watched a bunch of people getting stabbed and scream. It make you all feel all the feel, especially if you have like that little bit of nostalgia for it. As I said, the whole film really doesn't hold up because it's a children's movie, so like it's not really meant to hold up, even though this got Oscar nominations, which is wild. But
not only did it get Oscar nominations, it got nominated for Best Picture,
which is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. That's because, you know why? Because James Cromwell's a fucking boss.
And he got like supporting actor nominations. He got Best Director nominations. Like it got like Babe was like Oscar bait. Which honestly I'm so here for. I'm kind of sad that movies like Babe, or you know, when we were growing up, like Gladiator would sweep Oscar nominations, or Lord of the Rings, like those kind of big like bombastic pieces of filmmaking, which I guess we don't really get anymore because everything is just CG nonsense now. I guess Mission Impossible is like the closest you get, which might be a pivot to Jack in a moment, but like that's the closest you get to like big bombastic filmmaking now. Because before Indiana Jones, which opens with a set piece on a train, there was a trailer for Mission Impossible that was just like a behind the scenes feature of like, here's the amount of effort we did to do a real set piece on a train.
Have a look at how much we nearly killed Tom Cruise this time.
Yeah, and that's like the entire point. It's like, oh, we nearly threw him off this train into a pit. And then you go straight to the first scene of Indiana Jones, which is like a heavily CG version of the same thing with a heavily CG'd Harrison Ford. And I can't help but think that trailer was very deliberately placed. But yeah, Babe, it's just a delightful, wonderful movie that will make you feel good.
I know we just talked about Mission Impossible, but I do kind of want to leave Jack's ones to last here, so I'm gonna run in and say, on the subject of things that were in the rotation for us as kids, right? We grew up not only during the heyday of movies like you just discussed, Garrett, but we also grew up during the heyday of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I watched the Arnie 3-part documentary on Netflix since the last time I was on the show, and I'm going to mention that part briefly because then I moved on to something else. I thought it, and I know, Jack, you've watched it as well. I thought it was a really fascinating look at that man's life. And as far as like a 3-part documentary go, I think they did it really well because they split it. Like, part 1 is Arnold the bodybuilder, part 2 is Arnold the actor, and part 3 is Arnold the politician. And I thought all 3 episodes of the documentary were really fascinating. I think he was fairly unflinching and honest about himself and his life and his times and the moments in which he did not exactly cover himself in glory throughout his life. I think it was one of the most frightening examples I've ever seen of an iron will, a man who was like, he was going to be Arnold. He was going to be that level of star, and nothing on this earth was ever going to stop him. And anything he went, hey, I'd like to do that now, he fucking did it. And did it like alarmingly quickly and alarmingly well. And I feel like he's a guy that a lot of, in the 90s and then into the 2000s, when we moved away from those macho action stars, got a lot of stick, and almost to the point where I feel people underrate just how likable a screen presence the guy was. Which brings me on to what I then watched, having discussed this documentary with Jack. I sat down, I opened up Disney Plus, Prime last weekend, and I watched Kindergarten Cop.
Hell yeah.
And I am pleased to report that movie holds up fantastically well. And that was a movie that was definitely, Garrett, in that rotation on RTE. I saw Kindergarten Cop dozens of times growing up.
Yeah, the Arnie canon and the Robin Williams canon of children's movies were all over that era.
Yeah, and of course we always think about Arnie as the action star, and it's great because Kindergarten Cop starts off with a classic Arnie action style scene of him chasing down some criminals, and it's like the very seldom seen but very cool Arnold look of the kind of like unkempt hair, unshaven, tiny sunglasses, and a trench coat. This should have been a longer term Arnold look. It was class. But he is somebody that like I warm so much to now when I see his comedic performances. Like, obviously, it's not a tumor thing is from this movie. There's a lot of great bits, and I think it's one of those times where we often see movies nowadays where it's like, God, somebody just had one idea and tried to stretch it out to 90 minutes and it sucked. But you know what? Somebody sat down in a boardroom at whatever studio put this out. I can't remember who it was. And they went, Arnold Schwarzenegger acting opposite children for 90 minutes. And you know what? They fucking knocked it out of the park because that was all it needed to be. And it was great. Just Arnold in that space, as massive as he is, reacting to child actors saying fucking weird things to him is really great. It's such a charming little movie. And I can totally see how it was one of the ones like my parents were happy to have on that rotation at RTE, because you're definitely going to enjoy it as a kid, but you're also like, if you're the parent that has to sit through the kids movie, there's plenty to enjoy in there and plenty of gags that obviously would have sailed over your head as a kid that are really good now. Arnold is just such a magnetic screen presence. I love the man. And then another thing I watched that I kind of watched, I had thought about it for the first time in a long time. And I was like, I'm actually going to watch some of this now, if for nothing else, only to see if I can pop Garrett by saying the words Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip on a podcast.
I never liked Studio 60.
Yeah, so this is... Studio 60 is like the red-headed stepchild of Aaron Sorkin's oeuvre.
Well, people hate the newsroom too, to be fair.
Yes, they do. But
I'm a newsroom defender personally.
The newsroom was a bigger hit, though. That's for sure.
That's true. And like literally every 2 months, you see just the same 5 clips of the newsroom go viral as people are like, "What the fuck was this show?"
Yeah. That's what
I like the newsroom.
That's where I liked it at the start, but I found it by the end insufferable.
See, the thing is, I think it's secretly his best comedy. I think the newsroom, and I think that's always like the little secret to Aaron Sorkin, particularly in television, that he always wrote comedy better than he wrote drama.
Well,
except when he wrote an active comedy. No, he always wrote a drama as a comedy better than he wrote drama or comedy.
So Studio 60, firstly, mind blowing that this is the show he stopped writing and exec producing actively on The West Wing to go do this. Him and Tommy Schlamme, the main director that he had on West Wing, they both went over. It was still at NBC that they did this. And this is like, basically, if The West Wing was the show where they tried to show the inside machinations of the American government, this is them trying to show the inside machinations of a Saturday Night Live, but not Saturday Night Live type show. And I was completely... It's funny because I saw this before I saw The West Wing. Because my auntie was really into this show, but she was never into The West Wing. The thing that got me in at the time was like, oh, it's another show starring Matthew Perry. I like Chandler. So that's why I watched it at the time. Whereas now, if I had discovered it now, I'd be watching it for Bradley Whitford, because Bradley Whitford needs to be on my screen more. And the two of them are playing like former producers on this SNL ripoff called Studio 60 that had been fired and then were brought back at the start of this show. And it's all about their relationship with the president of the network, who's played by Amanda Peet, and the big kind of dry executive guy who's Steven Weber, who should be in more things. He's great in this show. And Amanda Peet is great in this show as well. But the thing about it is, like Garrett said there, is like a lot of elements in the newsroom are very funny. West Wing I find very funny, very witty. The thing about this that even people who, like, I'm relatively high on Studio 60, I will never defend, is that anytime you see any sketch from this SNL type show, it is the least funny thing I've ever seen in my life.
Which some would argue is an accurate representation of SNL, but that's neither here nor there.
Yes, because I'm thinking about, like, at the time this would have aired, and like it would have aired in the like post Will Ferrell era of like when like the cast started to drop off, but they hadn't found the Bill Haders yet. They hadn't found their groove, so it was a down period for SNL.
I was having lunch with an old work colleague in Toronto, and yes, and I dropped the very hot take that I don't think there has ever been a good sketch comedy show. And he was so mad at me because he was like,
just wrong, mate.
He was like, do you like I Think You Should Leave? It's like, no, I'm sorry, not really. And then he was like, well, what about like classic SNL? It's like, there has never been a good SNL sketch, and he wanted to strangle me right there and then.
It's just not true, Garrett.
What I will say is, I don't think there's ever been a consistent home run sketch show ever, because the very nature of the sketch show is that you throw 100 things at a wall and see what sticks. So like Flying Circus, everybody thinks Flying Circus, iconic sketch show. You go watch actual episodes of Flying Circus as they aired, and it's one good sketch every 2 episodes and a bunch of weird shit, and then there's some stuff that's in the middle, but there's a lot of bad with the good. And it's the same with SNL, like where there are, I would not go so far as you. Far be it for me to interrupt Extreme G and his takes, but I would say there have been good SNL skits and sketches over the years. But again, you watch full episodes of that, like musical guests and all, and that is not a show that's hitting a home run every week. And like, it's well known for having the gap between the first and second musical performances on the show being where the sketches that go to die are sent. And shit like that. But yeah, for people like you who definitely think that of SNL, this is a very accurate depiction, because oh my god, every time they show a sketch of this show, I want to die. They are so painfully unfunny, and it's so weird to like go back and forth between these sketches that are painfully unfunny, but they're trying to be, and then have the characters around it speaking in like Sorkin dialogue that is much funnier than what you're seeing on the actual show. I do think it's a very talented cast. I really wish that I love Timothy Busfield as Cal, the kind of the director in the operating room. It's the first thing I ever saw Sarah Paulson in. She was like a relative unknown at the time. She's fantastic, and I have a bit of a soft spot for the show.
Garrett, honestly, I want to wind the clock back. I want to wind the clock back to where you said there were no good sketches on Saturday Night Live. Is that just for trolling purposes?
No,
'Cause I'm sure
it's not a funny show. It never has been.
Are you saying in the history of SNL, there's never been one good
That's
sketch?
about 45 years.
I cannot speak to the whole history, having not consumed the whole history. And to be fair, like, my SNL experience is skewed based on my lifetime. But in that time, anytime like an SNL sketch goes viral, it's never funny. Ever.
I will say
I'm on Gareth's side
the
of this
funniest,
one.
most prominent ones
you're
are
not.
probably officially classed
I
as the
am.
SNL digital shorts as well. Like all the Lonely Island stuff aren't technically sketches; they're digital shorts.
Did you not like any of the Lonely Island songs?
Was the Michael Bolton one an SNL sketch?
Yes.
But that's just because it's Michael Bolton.
Yeah, but that's why it's funny.
It's
and they
not
wrote
funny.
it.
It's just Michael Bolton. It's actually just a good song because Michael Bolton is singing. The song
Yeah, but you
itself
enjoyed
is not
it, though.
actually funny. I'm not like, haha, that's a good line. It's like, it's just a Michael Bolton song, so it's class.
I thought
Jack's
it
gonna
was
fight
very
you.
funny. No, I know, like, for a fact that you do find things funny. Like, you do have a sense of humor.
I know you do find things
You have
funny.
in your
It's a
life laughed.
It's a tremendous accusation to level at somebody.
But the thing is, even the worst shows that I've watched in my life, like, you know, like the dirt worst things, I think of like 2.5 Men or something, where I know it sucks. Every now and then it will still make me laugh a little bit. There'll be a good joke. There'll be a joke in there that lands and I'm like, okay, that was pretty funny. But honestly, mate, if you looked at like a top 20 SNL sketches, I guarantee you would find at least one of them funny. It's
Which was
They
it's
just
the same
have
argument
fun.
the person I was having dinner with made. It's like, I'm going to make you watch like the top 10 SNL sketches.
I'm not making you do anything.
You're going to come
Just to
back
confirm.
over to Ireland, come back down to Cork, strap me to a chair, hold my eyes open with tape, and force me to consume these things.
Have you learned nothing about Garrett? Like, you will have to do that to get him to watch it, because like even after the tribute incident on the podcast, he didn't listen to it until he was held hostage in a building
a
where
wrestling
wrestling was
show,
happening.
Well, that's it. The only way I could get to watch it is if like they interstitials between like commercial breaks on Impact or on AEW, and then you would have to watch them.
I think like a lot of the stuff that got the biggest on the show is stuff that you're conscious of from outside of SNL, like Blues Brothers and Wayne's World and shit like that.
Wayne's World, yeah. MacGruber.
Yeah, I was never a MacGruber guy though, I will say.
Oh, I love MacGruber.
But yeah, and it's very like again, I wouldn't have gone as extreme as Garrett on the take, but like I do know that like it's a very particular sensibility SNL comedy, with the exception of like stuff like The Lonely Island, which seemed to have fairly broad appeal. Like it had a success and a virality well beyond the show. That like Lonely Island stuff has been watched way more than SNL has been in probably a couple of decades.
Yeah, there are probably people that don't know that Lonely Island originates from SNL. They probably just assume it's...
There's probably people who've watched Wayne's World that didn't know that was SNL.
Speaking of tremendous comedies, you saw the new Mission Impossible.
I mean, that was great, wasn't it? Yeah, there were a lot of like kind of laugh out loud moments in this Mission Impossible, but again, Tom Cruise is killing it. Dave, I don't know if you agree with this, but
man, his Thetans are just radiating off the screen in this one.
just fucking rocks, man. It's every time I come out of one of these movies, I'm just like, they just nail these things, even because I don't know if it quite reached the heights of the previous one.
No, I wouldn't. I'd put it like either a half to a full star below Fallout.
Yeah. Because Fallout was special. Like, that was a really fucking good action movie. But this thing was real good. Like, some of the set pieces were incredible. I mean, it had a whole section on a train. And as we all know, that's the sort of thing that will hook me into a movie. Just put a train section in a movie. I'm a really simple guy. I enjoy a train section. Absolutely loved it. Just generally how how seriously they actually take what they're doing. You know, you're supposed to sit there and believe that there's an agency called the IMF, the Impossible Mission Force, and they do it just straight faced in every single one.
There's also I love it. Doesn't we can talk about the opening scene without tipping too much of what's in this film, but like this obviously since the TV show in the 60s. There has been this running thread in Mission Impossible about people in masks, but these masks are like so realistic to a sense of preposterousness because it is clearly just the other actor. Do you know what I mean? That's doing it. Like the masks do not exist that are this realistic. But there is a whole opening scene where we're expecting the guy who's like the I suppose the director of the IMF, who's having to explain stone-faced to other American government officials what the Impossible Mission Force is, all the while the most suspicious man in the history of the world is walking around in the room. And I was just like, as soon as he walked into the room, I leaned over to my mate who was next to me and I was like, that's Tom Cruise. I was like,
it could not have been more telegraphed.
Tom Cruise.
And he walked in and no one paid him any attention either. Yeah. They were like, no, we're just going to let this interloper who's just walked into this high stakes briefing with like the head of the CIA. And
even if they didn't know it was Tom Cruise, he's an incredibly suspicious looking man. And then when he reveals he is Tom Cruise, I still popped huge.
I know when Tom Cruise pulled that dumbass mask off, I was like, yay, Tom Cruise. Like an absolute, I am part of the problem. I realised this, but I didn't care. I didn't care. This thing ruled. The whole airport sequence was fucking awesome as well. The them sort of blasting around Rome was awesome. Just, I had a fantastic time, Dave.
I was disappointed that you missed the funniest moment in the whole movie, though.
I know, I didn't see it. The thing is, I saw it on an IMAX screen, right? So they are so big that there's genuinely so much screen to look at that I might just not have been looking at the right part of the screen at that point.
There's a moment where like two pricks get cleared off by a flying motorcycle that Tom Cruise has leaped off. That like, there are some moments of comic timing in this movie that are like, they are intentionally funny. Like there is a bit at the end where Tom Cruise makes a sudden surprise appearance into the scene. That's all I'll say.
Oh my God, yes.
It was tremendous.
The train surprise, let's call it that.
But you want to talk about somebody who is just like kind of like radiates off the screen in terms of like just personality and charm and stuff like that. Hayley Atwell in this movie is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. She was going to be my next point. It's very difficult to bring up Hayley Atwell in this movie without just saying she may be the most beautiful person on the screen in a movie full of extremely beautiful people.
I a movie with Tom Cruise in it.
But Tom Cruise, again, for a guy who's like, what is he, 60, 61 at this point? Like that dude, he looks good, man. There's no other way of saying it. Those Thetans, they're high, Dave. Like they're sky high.
Thetans Thetaning.
Yeah. Just look at that Thetanin. There you go, there's your episode title. God, we're going to get barred by the Scientologist community if I do that. Who cares? But yeah, this movie is a very good action movie. Everyone in it like plays their role really well. It is literally set piece to set piece to set piece. Like there's not too many scenes of just expositional dialogue. It just kind of thrashes along. It's 2.5 hours long, is it? Or is it 2:45 or something?
2:40 something, yeah.
Yeah, so it maybe is a bit longer than it needs to be, especially considering it's a part 1 of 2. But at no point during the movie was I sat there thinking like, oh God, I wish this thing would end. I was just enjoying the hell out of it. And it's quite simple. It's a bit like John Wick 4, where it's like, if you've seen a John Wick movie before and you like John Wick movies, go and see it because you'll love it. Same with Mission Impossible. If you've seen Mission Impossible, if you know Mission Impossible, if you love Mission Impossible, go and see this movie because you're going to absolutely love it. And again, anyone who's just, happened back into the world of Tom Cruise last year because someone took them to see Top Gun, probably, unwillingly, and then they really enjoyed the hell out of it. Go see this movie as well because you're just going to have a good time. And it's going to be like a 7-8 out of 10. And it's going to be 2 hours, 45 minutes where you're not thinking about the fact that you're going to die one day. So, go for it.
And what else have you been watching?
I also watched the Wham documentary, which I believe is the correct pronunciation. Wham, yes. It's just great. So it's one of those documentaries done in like that Asif Kapadia style that he popularized, where everything that you're seeing is pretty much just footage from the time period. So you're not really getting as much of the talking heads of like, you know, a shot of, you know, like Andrew Ridgeley in 2023 going, well, when I was in Wham, it's all like voiceover, and there's lots of kind of archival interview footage of George Michael explaining like his own, you know, parts and bits and pieces early of the story. But, you know, it's just so hard not to root for these guys. Like, if you didn't know too much about them, obviously it's impossible to have kind of lived through your life and not heard a Wham song. I mean, unless you're maybe like 12 or 13 years old or something, in which case you're probably not listening to this podcast anyway. This depends if Mark's still clipping bits up and putting it on TikTok. I'm not sure. Although saying that, Mark, the last time we spoke about Tom Cruise, that we got loads of TikTok hits, didn't we? So it might be worth doing.
Well, that was the first video I think I ever did. And it's still the most successful one, and it's just all been downhill since.
Yeah. So when you start off with Big TC, that's the only way is downhill.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, they're just, what I love about it is you see them right at the start, and they're just two nerds from high school. They're just sort of like two high school, like music-y, drama-y nerd type people, and they find each other, and, you know, like they just have a good time trying to make music, and the stuff they're making is cheesy, and every record label in the country's like, are you fucking having a laugh with this stuff? You know, and then they start kind of touring around doing like holiday camps and like gay bars and all sorts of stuff, like just anything, anywhere that would book them. And then like just out of nowhere, really, one of their songs, Wham Rap, gets kind of popular, and they kind of get a little bit of notice. And then obviously like it's the next 2 or 3 years of their lives, and everything just explodes and they go mega. But the thing that was really cool about the movie is it's all done through scrapbooks that Andrew Ridgeley's mum kept. She kept scrapbook of every single press clipping they ever had in the UK. So like all of the periods of the movie are like based around these scraps, and like their sort of graphics and the articles and stuff are really nicely interspersed within the movie. So the whole movie kind of almost feels like an audio narrated like teenage girls scrapbook of Wham from the 80s. It's just such a feel good movie. Really is, seeing these two guys that you just rooting for them the whole way through as they just get bigger and bigger. And then it's very clear that there's a point where it's like, okay, George Michael has now separated himself. Yeah. He's become an amazing songwriter. He's an amazing singer. You know, he's getting asked to do things like Live Aid and Band Aid, and like, you know, going and singing like the Freddie Mercury tribute concert and all of this. And yeah, and he sort of goes from, you know, kind of awkward looking sort of early 20s bloke to just the most beautiful man that possibly could have existed in the 80s. Like he had like the perfect like coiffed hair and the, you know, like the shape facial hair and like the fucking stone cut jaw and everything. Like he just looks like a poster the entire time. And you can see,
I think two of the very striking things about the documentary are, one, about like when they started, how much of a kind of like shy retiring wallflower George Michael was comparatively until he found himself. And then the other thing that really struck me was just how short the Wham era was.
Oh yeah, it was like 3-4 years, and then that was it. But they were so massive in that time that they just absolutely flew through the roof. But yeah, it was seeing George Michael's transformation from guy who was like doing funny songs with his buddy and wasn't really sure how to dress himself or how to look, to like, I don't know off camera if somebody got hold of him and was like, here's how to dress, here's how to do your hair, here's how to, like, you know, basically be a pop star. I don't know if that happened as much. I mean, like they kind of hint at him going over to America and, you know, like getting different advice from people to do this, that and the other thing. But it was in the documentary, you saw this very sudden transformation of like, okay, this is the guy now. And yeah, it's one of these things. It's just, you don't really have to like Wham. It's just an insanely joyful story of just two pals who happen to just stumble into becoming like the biggest pop band of the early to mid 80s, and then launched the career of George Michael and a megastardom. And genuinely, George Michael is one of the coolest like people
Yeah.
who ever became famous. Like, you know, all the great stories about him, you know, like just speaking to waitresses and restaurants and like, you know, paying off their college tuitions and like all of the social kind of stuff that he did. And he just generally seems like a fucking amazing bloke, like a really happy-go-lucky guy who kind of never really lost touch with his like working class roots, and his ideologies always kind of remained steady.
I think one of the other really nice messages about the film is just like what a like the ultimate in selfless friends in Andrew Ridgeley, like a guy who does not and did not begrudge George any of the success or wanting to split away and become solo. It's just like, no, that's more his thing. I'm so happy for him, and they seem to have like remained mates up until the very end.
Yeah, well, he just knew. He saw what I'm describing, which was George going from his mate in a pop band to, okay, look at this guy. He's going to be one of the biggest pop stars in the universe. And the fact that the trademark of that selflessness is that obviously they both kind of shared songwriting duties for Wham, but George wrote Careless Whisper, right?
Yeah.
And they were originally, early on in their career, they were trying to get that, you know, with the record companies as a song that was going to be the big song. And all the record companies were like, no, it's a load of shit, which is, you know, mind-boggling to me, and just shows how, you know, fucking executives have no idea what is a good creative property and what isn't. And that is why we stand in solidarity with the Writers and Actors Guild strike in America right now. But yeah, instead of kind of going, right, well, now we're famous, you know, let's go and do this as a Wham song, he was like, look, George, this is your song. So, you know, you go record it, you go off to a new studio and go and do it by yourself. And he did. And that was like his first big song, just as George Michael. And like, they used to perform it at Wham concerts and stuff, but, you know, actually originally, like if he'd, you know, recorded some instruments on that or like played anything along, like he would have been getting insane residuals from that song. And he was just like, no, that's George's song. He wrote it. It's going to make him a megastar, so fucking go do it. And
it was also one of the, like, it feels almost cliched how often it actually happened for real, that like a band lands into like a record office and plays what was like the A side of what was an absolute hit, and then the B side was Careless Whisper, and they heard both of those and were like, nah.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just
exactly
incredible.
That,
incredible.
Well, you mean you hear these stories all the time. It's a bit like, you know, fucking like, I say like Radiohead when I played OK Computer for the record company. They were like, this is awful. No one's ever going to listen to this. And it became the biggest selling album they ever did by fucking 2 or 3-fold. Like, these people really don't have a fucking clue. It's the same with Queen as well. They were like, we're going to release Bohemian Rhapsody, and everyone's like, nah. And it was their first number one. Like
Elton John.
You know. Yeah, exactly. People have their own specific way. It's I don't know, they just guess, they hear stuff on the radio and they're like, no, this is how everybody needs to sound. There is no room for these new and original people. But
at the same time, though, when you think about, not to defend studio executives, but
here he is.
Garrett, like, I will let you off with your genuinely horrific opinion about sketch shows.
Garrett's like, I just want to take this opportunity to say the Writers Guild strike is a sham.
Yeah, I stand with corporations over people.
They should get paid
fucking
less, if anything.
But the thing I was going to say is, like,
out of his mouth.
You don't know how many like tapes that executive heard. Like, they might have heard George Michael as the 45th person who passed their desk that day, and they might have just been like, I don't see it. You know, you don't know the extent. It's very easy in hindsight to go, you fucking whiffed on Elton John, but like, come on. If you have 100 people coming in front of you every day and you're trying to pick winners, you're like, statistically speaking, you are going to pass on some of the biggest acts in the history of music.
So needless to say, executives have never done anything wrong.
They have such a hard job, Dave. It's really tough for them. They should be paid more.
Oh my God, salt of the earth, every one of them.
I'm just waiting for, in defense of Bobby Kotick, at some stage from Garrett.
Tougher one that. Let's talk about video games. And it looks like it's just me and Mark on deck this week, so I'll give you the floor, my friend.
I have played so much video game this week. So a little while ago, I spoke on the show about me hacking or jailbreaking or modifying my 3DS and my Nintendo Wii. and the sort of like potential or the things that you can do with it coming out of it that are really exciting in 2023, and the sort of ease of which it is to do these modifications and what you can do with it going forward. I also at the time did the same with my PS Vita, but didn't actually do anything with it past that because I was too busy dicking about with the 3DS and the Wii. But in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Romania for like 2.5 weeks. And, like, I look at my Steam Deck, and it's a wonderful bit of kit. It's a wonderful device. And if I was going somewhere where, I'd be in like a hotel, like a resort for 2 weeks, not really doing too much traveling, maybe kind of going to places during the day, but coming back to the hotel as a central location, Steam Deck would be great. This isn't one of those type of holidays. We're going across the country. We're doing a lot of packing and unpacking out of bags, and the Steam Deck isn't really built for that. So I was looking at my PS Vita and I was like, I hacked the shit out of you a couple of months ago. What can I do with you? And I'm very pleased to report that there's so much you can do with the Vita. Effectively, so with the Nintendo 3DS and the Vita kind of follow suit. With the 3DS, you have basically the availability of pretty much the entire back catalogue of the 3DS, or the kind of DS to 3DS back catalogue. And with the Vita, no, I don't know the exact number, it could be, 98%. But basically, you have the bulk of the PS Vita back catalogue, the PSP back catalogue, and the original PlayStation back catalogue there. Through various means, and it's not even a case of having to find these ROMs or whatever online and then move them across to the Vita. It's available to do on the Vita itself, which makes the sort of ease and convenience of that just unbelievable. And one of the problems with the Vita is that the proprietary memory card that the Vita used was like a Sony specific card, and they weren't particularly big, and they weren't particularly cheap. So there are ways around, and this is the same with the 3DS as well, but there are ways around it where you can basically bolt in a 128 gig micro SD, which is what I'm using. And you can have, like 70, 80 games on there. So I spent, a couple of days just getting everything set up, and I've got, for my trip away, a whole bunch of Vita, PSP, and PlayStation 1 games, which is really exciting. And the thing is, as well, is you always forget, but when you go back and you play the PS Vita, everything just looks so good on that screen. It's such a good looking device, and it's such a... playing more of it this week, I've realised just still, even though there was some great stuff that came with the Vita, it was such wasted potential with that thing.
Lovely piece of it. I loved my time as one of the members of Vita Island.
And because I remember at the time when I was playing it when it came out, I primarily played, it was the device that I played Final Fantasy VII on for the first time. And then past that, I played a lot of Binding of Isaac and Spelunky. But one of the things I was playing this week is I didn't even realize that there was a 3DS port of Rayman Origins. So I played a little bit of that, and it's far too compromised compared to the real thing. But the PS Vita port is basically, it is the PS3 version, which is just, I've been wanting to play that game again for such a long time. So now I have it in basically the most ideal mode, that kind of pick up and play ability, just, bang out a level or two here and there. But there's also a couple other things you can do in terms of the modification. One of the things with the OS, if you've ever used a Vita, you have little bubbles that correspond to your games when you download them. And you could kind of create folders and then have a whole bunch of games in those bubbles. You couldn't, with this, it expands to allowing you to have PSP and PS1 bubbles, but there's also a piece of software that kind of gives you a sort of a side-scrolling kind of approach, like a catalog to your games as well, and also goes past, because I think the PS Vita, I think it's 100 bubbles is the max you can have, and with the micro SD card installed, if you've got a 500 gigabyte micro SD, you can go way past those 100 bubbles. So with this bit of kit, this bit of software, you can bypass that and just, be scrolling for days looking through all of your games. So naturally, one of the things that I decided to play was Batman Origins Blackgate, which I don't know, I saw it and I was like, I'm never ever going to play this, so I might as well have a look at it. I was never going to play this at the time it came out. I might as well have a look at this now. So this was obviously, the Batman Arkham trilogy, very well known. There was the Origins game that I never played, I never spent any time with, but there was also a spin-off or I don't even know if it's a sequel. I think it's a sequel to a spin-off that wasn't well received, that takes the form of a 2.5D Metroidvania on the Vita that is just... It's just not that great. Like, you can kind of see, in some ways it works where, you've got that kind of crunchy Arkham combat system in there, and while you don't think that would work on a 2D plane, they sort of get around it where, like, enemies will kind of be on, say if you're working on the X-axis, enemies will be on, like, kind of either side of the X-axis, kind of in the foreground or the background, and you only have the one kind of lane that you exist on, but as you do the combat, it kind of naturally like segues in between those lanes, and it works really well. Actually, it's quite seamless. But my god, this game has the worst map I think I've ever seen implemented into a game, where after about 2 hours of gameplay, I couldn't decide if this map was top down or on a 2D like side view, or if it was trying to do a version of both. All I do know is that at no point could I see where I was trying to go, or where I had been, which for a map I would say is quite a failure. So how much were PS Vita games at the time? I want to say they were like 40
Yeah, they were like
quid.
3DS game price, weren't they? Or slightly cheaper.
Yeah. I can't imagine anyone picking this up at full price thinking that they got their value of money for this fucking thing. So
Who made it? Was it the core Arkham team, or was it one of the spin-off people?
No, it was Armature Studio, which they actually did quite a few ports for the Vita. They did like the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. They did the Borderlands collection. The last thing they worked on was actually the Resident Evil 4 MetaQuest 2 port. So yeah, which pretty, I don't know, might go to some way explaining. I think it's just one of those things where, like Warner Bros. Just went, look, we need to get something on Vita. Here, fucking give us something. It feels like one of those like 12 to 18 month projects where, you look at the cutscenes, everything is like still 2D animated, well, not animated, but still kind of like comic book frame style sequences where you see the cartoon, the image, it doesn't actually animate, but they kind of move it across the screen to give the sense that there's like motion going on. You can see where it's just kind of compromised across the board.
Situation.
Yeah, absolutely like that. So yeah, there's a load of things that I want to play that I'll probably get to while I'm away. Like, I never played Tearaway. I know that's kind of like the big PS Vita game. I never finished Gravity Rush, but I have played a bit of it, so I'll get back to that. And yeah, I'm really excited to kind of just like dive into, because the Vita, again, I mainly just played like a shitload of Spelunky and Final Fantasy VII on it, so there's quite a bit of
that was the console I played Fez on.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect console for something like Fez. Like, it was kind of built up to be the indie device before
I don't know if it was
Switch.
I don't know if it was built up to be, or it was just that Sony first party abandoned it so quickly,
left it to die.
Yeah, it ended up being that device. But there's so much stuff on there, and there's like a bunch of, like, I didn't realize that the God of War. I don't know if it's the trilogy, but I think the first two at least, like the HD remasters, they're on there. The Metal Gear Solid HD collection is on there. Like, there's a bunch of kind of ports as well that I forgot made it way there. I think my biggest disappointment is there isn't a Devil May Cry HD trilogy port on there, because that would have been
they're on Switch.
But yeah, you're pretty yeah, but I don't know.
You touched on the screen there, by the way. I don't think I mentioned in the show, but when I got Zelda, I also got the
touched on the screen.
Very good. But when I got Zelda, I also got the Zelda Switch OLED, and
how is that?
Is like, it's not like go out and buy it difference, but it's honestly pretty close. Like everything
Yeah.
just looks so much better on that screen. It's crazy. I've become like an immediate convert to OLED screens. I'm like, oh my god, look at all these colors. Because I was playing the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters on them. I was like, look at all these colors. It's the most colorful thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, OLED is the truth. And that Vita just, I don't know what I did with my original. I'm guessing I must have sold it at some point, but I was really fortunate that I think like when I went to go pick up, someone was selling, it was the Vita and a 3DS and a bunch of games
Get a
as
PSP
well,
in the bag.
for I think I'd already bought about 5 by that point, so it would have been unnecessary.
Oh, because the 4 was
yeah. 6 is the tipping point. That's just absurd, Gareth.
But she was selling them. I got both of them for 100 quid, and I then sold the 3DS for about 80 quid. So I basically bought a Vita for 20 quid, which is one of the better deals that I think I'll ever make. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm surprised myself that I didn't kind of dive into this earlier. But again, I have a Steam Deck, so I've been doing so much stuff with that. So yeah, that's that, and it's also probably the device that I'll play Final Fantasy IX on when I get to that. Which brings me to, over the past week and a bit, I have sunk about 22 to 23 hours into Final Fantasy X.
If you say bad things about this game.
I have a bunch of things. I don't know. I don't know where I stand with this game. Like, up until this point, I've played, where are we at now? 4, 6, 7, 8, and I'm, into 16. And for the most part, I'll exclude 16 because I haven't finished it. But I've either been able to say I definitively like this game, or I think it's one of the worst things I've ever played. You can guess which one of those I would refer to. And so I finished 4 earlier this year, and I thought that was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I did start 5, but then I think that's when Breath of the Wild came out, or maybe 16, one of them. So I'll have to get back to that at some point. And my plan is I do want to work through all of them. And 10 is a game that I started like 2 or 3 times, and I never got past like the first sort of opening sequence before I just went, I can't be fucked with this, so I'll come back to it another time. This is the HD remaster I'm playing on Steam, which comes with 10.2 as well, which I'll probably play afterwards. But I don't know where I stand with it. And I think part of the problem is... as I drop something on my keyboard. I think part of the problem with it is that up until 10, you never look at these games as like, it's kind of a product of its time and it's not aged particularly well, because I don't know, I just think of like anything before then is just, that is from that generation, and either it's timeless like A Link to the Past, or it's just this kind of weird sort of janky thing from the sort of PS1 era. But then as soon as you get to the PS2 and anything onwards, I guess there's enough that you can kind of attach it to this is sort of like modern day gaming, kind of. Whether it's, stuff like the resolution of textures is a little bit higher, there's voice acting, there's like a little bit more kind of movement.
now.
This is the difference. Yeah. This is what we're hitting on, though. This game features voice acting. That's why he hates it.
Let me tell you. Well, this is the thing, right? But because the voice acting in this game is terrible. Like, it is utterly fucking atrocious. Wrong. And part of the problem is because I've been playing Final Fantasy 16, which is some of the best voice acting I've ever heard.
Fine.
No, I think the voice acting in 16 is really, really strong. I like it. But like, you've got John DiMaggio, God bless him, but he is doing, I think he's trying to do a Caribbean accent, but he ends up turning into like a Mexican gangbanger at points, and he kind of blurs the line between the two of them. And I guess if they did this in 2023, on a scale of 1 to
Jar Jar Binks, how bad is it?
It's not that bad.
No, but there actually is like some sort of ferryman that exists that basically might as well be Jar Jar Binks that does exist in the game, but you only get about 3 or 4 lines of dialogue from. That's the one. Yes.
Shoop off. I love the shoop off guy. How can you hate the shoop off guy?
Rides the shoop off? He's like German. He's not Jar Jar Binks.
I didn't say
Jar Jar
I'm
Binks.
sorry. There's at least enough there. So I think one of the things that does age this game is I think that the voice acting is quite poor. But what the problem I think on top of that as well is that, like, now I haven't played enough of Final Fantasy IX to remember, but even with like 7 and 8, like the dialogue of those games is fairly well fleshed out. They're not by any means the best written games of all time, but there is there's weight and there's depth and there's a lot to those stories and those narratives. And I think because this is the first one that has full-on voice acting, I feel like they kind of dial back the dialogue. I don't want to say dumb down, but it feels like there's less dialogue, and the dialogue that is there is a bit clunky because there's voice acting.
I think it's just the voice acting, because the depth of characters and writing is, if anything, a little more than some of the games you've played.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a really heavy story, Mark. Like when you finish
it. I love the gimmick that, Mark, you can't even get into, finally, after all, I'm sure, the years of persuasion, get into one of Jack's favourite video game franchises without grossly upsetting him with all your takes on it.
I mean, look, you were here when we spoke about FF8 now, so come on. I disagree. I think, here's the thing. I think the themes and the kind of concept that they're going for in terms of the story, thumbs up. I think, exploring like these ideas on religion and religious zealots and I guess, sacrifice. I'm at that point now. All of those things I think are very interesting ideas to explore, and like there's enough here that I want to see this thing through. I think the execution of a lot of it is pretty poor, and I think that the dialogue, both in terms of the voice acting and just the actual like narration itself, I think is quite poor. But I also concede that, this is a game that's over 20 years old, so,
Yeah, that, and you're wrong.
He's wrong. Yeah, you're wrong. Yeah. It's the most important part, is you're wrong.
Welcome to having an opinion.
In your wrongness and you're wrong.
Yeah. Studio 60 never had a line that good.
Yeah. See, the heat was on Garrett before about his defending executives, but now it's back on Mark.
So I think, I think with Final Fantasy games, a lot of the time they come into kind of three flavors. Either you like the story, you like the systems, or you end up liking both. And currently, I think with this, I like the systems of this game. I do think that the sphere grid and the way you have character progression used in that, I think is really unique and for the most part there's a couple of like UI tweaks I would do to it, but for the most part I think it's a fairly well executed system.
I think the sphere grid,
they never came back to.
Mark, I think the sphere grid is responsible for what has become the modern skill tree in gaming, because they are all like shittier versions of what that sphere grid
they're all
was.
like nodes on a screen, and you unlock the nodes, and it all looks like that, doesn't it?
That. It does, yeah, and I want to say Final Fantasy X is the first game I remember doing that. And like you said, like the smart thing about it is you do have a sphere grid where you can unlock all the spheres for everyone, but everybody starts in their own individual areas. So it's like you build out all of the skills, the core skills of your character, before you can kind of progress any further to kind of get different moves and different skills to other characters, and then you can kind of overlap, and it makes it interesting. And picking different directions for your characters to go in makes it interesting as well, because it's like, well, this person, say like Auron, has like all the power moves and break, but do I want to direct him towards some magic? Do I want to direct him towards like knowing some of the like white magic spells, or do I want him to know some green magic? Do I want him to be casting hate? Like all of these things that you can do and choose. It's really, really good, and it's really, really in depth. And the modern version of it is like shitty nodes on the screen, really dumbed down, that you just sort of activate.
There's an astonishing. I mean, you again looking like Final Fantasy 16 in terms of the
which is still nodes on a screen. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah,
it is, but it's just like, here's three things you can do. Here's like one additional attack,
and it's all about make these attacks more power. Like the attack you're already using is 12% more powerful.
Yeah. And there's one character as well for you to upgrade. So it is the most dialed down version of that. I wish the one thing with the sphere grid that I would do is I wish that you could fucking zoom out a little bit. Because I feel like the navigation of it is a bit clunky.
You can zoom out.
And like, can't see, there's no option I can see how to do it.
You can zoom out.
I see no UI prompt on the screen that says you can zoom out.
I can't remember the button, but you can definitely zoom out on the sphere grid, because otherwise how would you know where to go?
Because that's the thing. I'm having to fucking like just traverse across the sphere grid until I stumble across like the character.
You do know what Google does, right, Mark? You can just
but no, I looked. I couldn't find anything
to
on
Mark's
that.
point, I would say when this game originally came out, there wasn't a Google. So if Mark was playing this game at the time, he'd be fucked.
No, he wouldn't, because there'd be a manual for him to look at.
The other thing I was going to say about the sphere grid as well. Oh yeah, so the one issue that the one major issue I had with it is that so I had the fucking fight with the dragon on the airship today, which I finally got my first death of the game, and then got another subsequent 4 deaths from the bastard.
Did you use the airship to attack it, like I suggested?
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah, but that's what I did for those first 4 deaths, but that wasn't the reason I died. But the issue that I had with it is that I didn't have... Yuna has the Asuna ability, and so I wanted to give Asuna to one of my other characters, but the problem is the game uses like the sort of real world logic that Yuna isn't there like with the gang during that part of the story. So I was scrolling around like the sphere grid looking for a character before eventually realizing and talking with someone on Twitter that she's not available during that part because she's obviously not
getting married
with the gang, which is like...
You want to drag her away from her wedding. Forced wedding, so you can teach her, so you can get her to teach you Azuna and another character. What a greedy, selfish act!
In-game logic. By the way,
don't you think Seymour in this game is basically Bowser? In that he shows up, takes the main character's girl, and instead of like any other grand plans for her or any great evil, he's just like, no, we're just going to get married. It gets really married.
Does he have a sick ass tux?
He does.
No, he has a stupid haircut.
He does have a dumbass haircut.
Yeah, I just, everything, his voices. Seymour sounds like, you have those games back during this time and before where, they couldn't afford to get like English localization in terms of the voice actors. So they found like the nearest programmer who spoke enough English to get to do the voice in, a language that they weren't fully comfortable with. Seymour sounds a little bit like that.
No, I don't know about that. I think he sounds very, very deliberately sassy. Like, like somebody really non-threatening, somebody that you wouldn't expect to be an evil guy, which is why he's such an evil guy. Like he's trying to kind of catch you off guard.
He feels like otherworldly, which I think is kind of the point.
Yeah.
A little bit,
but otherworldly. But there is an element of sass to him as well, Garrett, where he's like, there's a little bit of a playful, sort of happy-go-lucky element to him before he turns into an absolute gobshite monster and ultimately becomes one of the main bad guys.
Not a gobshite monster.
But I think the one big thing about this game that I like more than anything else is the active, like being able to switch out of characters like in battle.
Right.
I think the way that works and the way that opens up so much tactics in terms of how you approach fights, and the fact that obviously each of your characters has their own distinct flavor, which you can then expand upon within the sphere grid. I think obviously I'm only kind of scratching the surface, and I know that there's like the expert version of the grid where you can be even more insane with like your customization. I can see the potential and what you can do with that and how much you can unlock with that, and I think that like for that, and again, I think with this game, systems-wise, thumbs up. I really have, like, other than, again, a couple of UI things, I think my biggest, like, fucking UI UX frustration I have is that you'll go on to, the equip screen for your character, and you can go across, you can press the bumper shoulders, that takes you across each character, and you can immediately see what you can equip and what you can see, like, what options are available. That's all good, that's great. For some reason, though, so with Final Fantasy X, it gives you the option to customize weapon and armor. So if you've got like a piece of armor that has 3 slots and one of them has HP 10, you can then add another 2 as well. But the problem is instead of like giving you the same sort of screen where you can bump across characters and then pick from like the list of armor or weapons that's available for them, it just gives you one long list of all of the weapons and armor. And it's not the biggest deal breaker, but it's one of those things that's like, you've given me this here, this perfectly convenient way to go across the characters and the weapons and armor. Why did you have to just give me one fucking long list that I have to scroll? Because I have a lot of weapons and armor now, so it takes you, like a good 30 seconds to scroll down to the bottom to find whatever it is I'm looking for. It's not a deal breaker, but I think it's one of those things that if you looked at this as like a remaster, you'd be like, that's a little kind of quality of life feature that I could tweak there.
But you can sort your armor and your weapons and stuff. You can sort it. Like,
you should also just sell some of your armor.
Again, but there's no, because like so much of my armor and weapons have like different perks and buffs. Like this one is fireproof, or this one is waterproof, blah blah blah. So I don't want to sell anything because I'm going to stumble across an enemy at some point and have no idea. And this is another thing, and this isn't so much a complaint, but it's a kind of like game design question, because I've thought about this a lot when it comes to Final Fantasy, in that so often you'll come into a fight with a boss and you have like absolutely no idea. Sometimes you can kind of very obviously see that it has like a weakness to fire or whatever. But so many times you go into a fight fairly blind, and so many times you'll go into a fight without even realizing that you're going into a fight, and you're not prepared, and you just get like wasted. As compared to something like a Pokemon, where 9 times out of 10 you're going to go into it and you're going to come across a Pokemon that you're aware of, and the sort of layout of the elements is fairly obvious. That you always know that you're going to fight a fighting type Pokemon, and you know that flying and psychic are the way to go. But you can't do that with Final Fantasy. And
can I just point out though that that's probably not the most apt comparison, because Pokemon is at its very core a children's game. So but they're going to telegraph that for you.
I'm not trying to make a comparison here.
But you just compared them.
No, I'm not. No, I didn't compare. What I'm saying is that one type of game does it this way. One type of game does it that way. I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing.
Oxford Dictionary describes the comparison as.
You let me finish. What I'm saying is I can't decide which one is better or worse, not because they're the same, because they're very different. I'm not comparing them. I'm just kind of putting them together and saying, is this like the way that you should do it, or is that the way you should do it? Could be one or the other. I don't know. I find it but the thing is, when I play Final Fantasy games, I have to use a walkthrough. Like, I can't imagine if I was 12 playing fucking 9 or 10 or whatever, I'd probably have those kind of 80 to 100 hours spare to just like blindly make my way through this and get wasted 12 times on a boss before figuring it out. I can't imagine doing it now. Like I started like Final Fantasy 9 the other day, and even so with 10, there are so many times where the walkthrough will say like, at this point here, if you haven't collected like X amount of items, there's either no way you're going to get these again, or you're not going to be able to get them again until much later on. And by the way, there's like a super boss that you have to get past. And there's so many things where it's so like not obvious how you would like actually the best thing for me when I think about it is like with the fucking the triple triad system in FF8, and the way that you get certain cards. There are so many like things and hoops that you have to jump through to get certain things. It's like there's no way anyone would blindly stumble across most of these things.
I think but it's not an essential component of the game. Like the point is that you're not supposed to collect every card. You're supposed to be like, oh, this character has that card. That's cool. I'll win it from them. And if you don't find other cards, that's fine. It's not like they gate progress behind any of these things. It's meant to be things you find and collect. It's not meant to be like a thing you have to go get. I think the walkthroughs are causing you stress by being like, you can't get this item that is ultimately inessential, but you can't get it anymore, so it's making you feel stressful.
Yeah. No, or you can get it later in the game. Or like in that instance, back in the day, people just used to play a game and just fucking figure stuff out. And like, you didn't have to have the exact same experience as everyone else. Like, it's fine. You would just explore it.
And then that's what makes playing it again, because you find something you never saw before. It's like, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's also that I don't want to get stuck on a boss for like 5 hours because I either didn't have like this specific weapon.
Let me tell you about a little game called Elden Ring I recently completed.
I was going to say, but like in a Final Fantasy game, I've never been stuck on a boss for 5 hours, because after the first couple of times you die, you figure out, because most Final Fantasy bosses at most will have like 4 or 5 attacks, and I guess it's the same in Elden Ring as well, but Elden Ring it's a lot harder because you have to position yourself right, time your dodges.
It's a turn-based game, so it's totally different.
Yeah, exactly. So you can build up an arsenal of tactics on how to beat something very, very quickly in a Final Fantasy game. Like, the only bosses that ever really cause me real pain are the sort of side bosses, like the non-optional bosses, like all of the Aeons you're collecting, with Yuna and going through the temples and stuff. Like, at some stage, there's like you can get like a dark version of them that you can battle to kind of unlock like a sort of more powerful version of the Aeon, like, as you go later on into the game, which isn't really messing around with anything with the story, but those are the really hard bosses, those are the ones that are really, but the main story bosses, like if you've been playing the game diligently enough to be leveled up and have like parts of the sphere grid locked across, and you might bash your head up against a couple for a few turns, but after a while you just learn the patterns.
Yeah, but again, like a lot of the time, either you learn the patterns or you kind of brute force it.
That's the game.
Yeah,
You fight the boss and you work out.
I know.
But the thing I would say is that like progress is never gated behind items in these games ever.
No,
it'll make it easier if you have the right items, but not dramatically. It's usually just whatever level you are.
Well, in fairness, in fairness, sometimes progress is gated behind you needing to grind for the next 3 hours.
Welcome to JRPGs, my friend. Though I don't like. I think like the original SNES versions of like 5 is probably the worst for that. Maybe 4 as well. They've eased them in some of the new editions. I don't think like 7 to 10 or even 12 are like that really. 10 has some difficulty spikes if you don't like somewhat exploit the sphere grid. You're coming up on some of them, so I think you'll have a great time as you get towards Anarchy. There is some real difficulty. There's some bosses there, pieces of shit in this game.
Back to the sphere grid. I just typed into Google the phrase "zoom out sphere grid Final Fantasy X." Top result tells you how to zoom out on the sphere grid.
No, good to know. I think the thing with you talked there about like having to take on a boss multiple times to get through it. The thing is, I think like that compared to say if I have a boss fight in a kind of more twitchy style like hack and slash. I guess even using Elden Ring, I'm or like a Cuphead or something like that. That style of game where there's the kind of like action response and sort of skill level, and there obviously is skill in turn-based fights in terms of learning the systems and whatnot. But I'd rather spend an hour on that type of boss fight than an hour on a turn-based kind of style of boss fight. But obviously that is just purely a preference, and that one is mine. The one other thing, Jack, you just mentioned there, the dungeons or the temples or whatever you want to call this game, fucking trash.
I love them for
the worst.
You have done the ice one is the worst. I hate that one so much.
Yeah, they're just I fucking hate them.
The song just tormenting you.
The song is the worst.
It's the perfect song in the sense that it is almost taunting you for being stupid.
It's absolute fucking trash.
And you're like, I can't do these stupid puzzles. I don't know. And I love the limitation that you can only hold one orb, even though you have 2 hands, but you can only hold one orb at once. It's so video gamey.
It feels like when
each orb.
Yeah, you can't hold a second orb. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
When you play a game and like it has like either like a mini game or some little kind of bit where like they spent a month putting this together and it feels so fucking tacked on and janky compared to the rest of this really kind of well crafted thing. This is what these fucking dungeons feel like. It's just I can't. It
falls into one of my long-standing video game hot takes that any non-puzzle game that has puzzles, take them out.
Yes.
They're always trash. They're always terrible. If you're not a puzzle game, don't put puzzles in your game. Yeah. They're always bad. There never changes of pace. They're always frustrating, and they will always be the part of the game that at the end you're like, I wish they took them out.
There's one good temple, I think, in Final Fantasy X. I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think the Bavel temple is cool, Garrett, with all the different platforms.
At least it has like a concept, which I like. Because a lot of them are just like, put the right orb in the right slot.
Yeah, put the thing in the thing, yeah. Like, there's no... It's not meant to be like your traditional, proper puzzle Zelda-style temple. They are kind of unnecessary. But the Bavel temple puzzle, I think, with the platforms is really cool. It looks cool as well.
I was going to say, is that the one with like the kind of like sort of neon lights?
It's the one with like the travelators where you're constantly moving.
Yeah,
you're right before
I
it.
don't know, like that, but I just
like literally right on the cusp.
I know. I'm in Bavel at the moment, but it's the one thing from when I was younger. I don't know if it was you, Jack, or it might have even been our friend Andrew, but it's the one thing I remember from seeing one of you guys playing it is that particular dungeon, because I remember like the visual design of it, and I remember looking at it going, it looks pretty cool, but not giving a shit because it's Final Fantasy, obviously. So I'm gonna get to that.
Have you ridden Zishuba? That's the question.
I have ridden.
My favorite part of that game is just talking to your man Machin, and he's like, "Let me sit you down for 20 minutes while I tell you the lore of the world." And I sit there and I learn the lore of the world. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, And this game, and I mentioned this in one of our group chats earlier, this game really, really wants to tell you that Lulu has tits. And will show you at any given opportunity. And actually, most of not most of, but quite a few of the sort of the female character designs in this game in terms of their attire of choice is very much from the early 2000s.
Yeah,
it is a Japanese video game from 2002.
Yes.
I very much enjoyed the stereo. Yeah,
like literally, because I played the start of this game recently. I actually played some of it on the plane and home from Toronto, and like when you see Riku at the start of the game, they frame her butt in every shot, every single shot. There's like butt right there.
And the very unfortunate thing is that her I'm sure she's not underage, but a lot of her mannerisms and portrayal and character design. It makes you think that she's like a very young woman.
You're in murky territory when you have to say, I'm sure she's not.
Yeah.
It's a very sort of like kawaii Japanese, like schoolgirl kind of.
She's Ed from Cowboy Bebop, like in so much of her mannerism.
Yeah, like she has like I'd say more like the traditional like anime girl and a kind of Japanese things style, but also her backstory and the story of the Albed people in the game I think is really cool. Like it's
and that's the thing. I do think like in terms of the backstory and the actual overall
phenomenal
plot,
world building.
I do think
game.
The whole kind of concept of sin and world building. There's a lot there. I mean, I just think a lot of the execution.
If this game, I wonder if you went into this game and you're like, I'm turning the voices off, and you literally just read the text, I think you'd enjoy this game like 40% more.
I probably would. Do you know what I will enjoy? I will enjoy the sort of 2-hour fucking deep dive that exists on YouTube by someone. I'll probably enjoy that more in terms of explaining the world of Final Fantasy X than the actual game does itself. Please do.
Garrett,
I will watch it.
Oh, please. I want to watch that like right now. You can log off the rest of this podcast.
As we come back,
you will receive your full fee for the
Garrett's
podcast.
a Final Fantasy lore YouTuber now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll have 10 finished by next week. I feel like by looking through the walkthrough, there's like 4 chapters-ish left to do, but I was scrolling through and I was seeing a lot of bosses coming up. So, yes, I imagine that's going to be fun. But
also, you need to get the full backstory of the raids issue buff.
Also, we didn't touch on Blitzball. How much Blitzball have you been playing? Oh, get off the call. Dave, kick him. Dave, kick him off.
I might hate Blitzball more than the dungeons
man.
in this game.
He was so bad at it, like Garrett, when I was on the phone with him, like he just wasn't getting the tactics at all.
Yes, I don't know if it's still up there, but there is. I did Twitch stream it the week before last. I don't know if it's still up there, but I Twitch streamed it for about an hour or so. Like the Blitz, the game that you have to play. And I
never mind the Final Fantasy lore movie. We're going to do a full sports movie around teaching Mark Blitzball.
Yeah. You could get real good at it. Also, Mark, like the more, because as you go around the world, you can recruit Blitzball players now.
Yeah.
Which makes things,
I know you can do that.
Yeah, it makes things so much easier, like as you get later in the game, because that is
but it doesn't make the
to your
gameplay
Aurochs.
better,
Let them grow and develop over time. It's more satisfying.
For some of them it is, but like some of them are so hopeless. Plus, I really like signing Parguado. Like he was my guy every time.
Brother was my guy on the airship. He did like phenomenal speed on him, so you could just like blitz past everyone. Pardon the pun. The worst thing is like I let Datto go, and then he went to the Luca Goers and became like my arch nemesis. He became so good.
I fucking hate the Luca
like,
Goers. Fucking
Datto. How was I supposed to know you were like the ace of Blitzball?
To be fair to Mark as well, that first Blitzball game against the Goers.
Oh, you're doomed if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, it is really it's really tough, but like you need to kind of learn from your mistakes on it. As like, did you keep replaying it and beat it eventually, Mark, or did you just?
Yeah, I think I played it like another 2 times. I can't remember if I did it off stream that night or I did it the morning, but I did
because you can like get good at Blitzball and win your Blitzball games by like understanding the game. But that first one, it's like you have to like know how to exploit the Blitzball systems to really have a good chance of winning, and even then,
yeah.
And also, the other thing as well is I got the Ject shot, and like again, and all right, this is my one last thing, and then we'll sign off on this, right? So the tutorial that it gives you about how to learn the eject shot, right? It goes, you need to press like these button prompts.
Yep.
But the way it gives it to you is it gives you like down, right, X or down, right, RB, whatever it is, left, right, LB or whatever. But you look at the way you look at it, where it says down, right, and we'll say X, you would think that you have to press down, right, and X. What you actually need to do is that's actually meant to be a diagonal, like down, right. But it doesn't give you just like a single arrow in that diagonal direction. You look at it and you think like from kind of, I don't know, like Mortal Kombat or any kind of fighting game, you're like, oh, that's a down, right you want me to do. So I failed that thing about 8 times in a row because the game doesn't tell you that's a diagonal approach. I just kind of like went, I guess I'll fucking try that because I've tried everything else. And then on top of that as well, it doesn't really signify that what comes afterwards isn't those arrows. It just gives you your old man just fucking shouting things on the screen.
Putting you down and all. It's like, you stupid piece of... You're a useless kid.
Just shitting on you. Yep.
That whole tutorial, like, when I think about things in terms of just like a poor
you can't
UI
do
UX
it, kid.
that I would just completely
I'm the best.
Yeah.
You can't do it, kid.
Poorly implemented.
I love that bit because I just think it's such a it explains a big part of Titus's personality.
No, but in terms of like actual kind of like storytelling and kind of fusing gameplay and world building, like thumbs up. I just think again the fucking execution of it is like, oh my god, I would have done it so differently.
It's really not.
Yeah,
but it's not asking for a diagonal arrow. It's saying down, right, or up, left.
Doesn't it say them at the same time though? Like it has
no.
He's saying it goes down and then it goes right. I actually can't.
No, in my playing of the game, was literally just like hold the stick in the direction of the prompt and press X.
Yeah, the direction. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's like a HD collection thing or something, but it's telling me up.
You can't do it, kid.
Up, down, left, right, checky.
What's that, Jack?
Up, down, left, right, checky. No, I think the. Are you playing the HD remaster or are you playing?
Yes,
you are.
I'm playing the HD remaster.
Very important question. This is like again, deal breaker. New music or remix music? Or have you changed the music?
I mean, to be honest, I've listened to like a little bit of it, but I've had it on quite.
No wonder
you don't
like this game. But also original music, new music bad.
Yeah, they over. It's just too busy, isn't it? Like the newer versions.
Yeah, like I'm playing the Pixel remasters, and they actually did a really good job with the music in those. It's like, they actually made them like fuller pieces.
Yeah, they're really good.
But the FF10 music, they absolutely butchered.
Yeah, but they trim back. The thing is, though, Garrett, because those original Pixel games, you only had so much fucking like
it's like a 15-second loop
of having 2 instruments. Yeah,
like at the same time. There's only like 8 tracks of music that you have to work with on like those kind of 16-bit on SNES.
Yeah,
I guess.
Precisely that. Yeah, Mark. It's like so. Therefore, when they had something that was, I mean, the Final Fantasy X soundtrack, it didn't really need changing. Like you could have remastered it maybe and compressed it a bit more and brought the volume up or whatever, which I wouldn't have liked doing anyway because I think the dynamics of it are so beautiful. Like Tzanikand is like I actively nearly weep every time I hear that song. It's just such a beautiful piece of music, and like the swells and stuff in it just bring you into the emotion of the music so much more than just all of it being at the same volume and then having like no dynamic range and no emotional like gut punch. So they did that, but then also just added a load of polyphonic nonsense on top of it as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I've found that I registered more with the FF4 soundtrack and like of the, look, FF16 has a number of issues, but as we've all kind of documented, the soundtrack's other thing is pretty fun.
I was going to 10s though. 10s is like
I've had the battle theme to FF16 in my head for about 3 weeks straight now. Like, just I'm ready to go. Let's fucking do this.
And did you genuinely not love the opening section with Otherworld, where you get like the FMV and the Blitzball and the metal?
Well, again, I've seen that bit about fucking 5 or 6 different times.
And it rocks though.
It's all right. It's fine.
Come on now, that rocks.
All right. There's
the kid in Killica that you walk up to and he's like, I want to be a blitzball when I grow up. And I'm like, good job, kid, you did it.
Yep. And then I guess moves him off the screen. But make sure he presses the diagonal button.
I guess the big thing that will come after this is like, as I said, I have started FF9.
But if you hate 9 too, we will have to actually fight.
Yeah, in particular, if you hate Vivi's story in 9, you may not have a soul.
me and Jack will be coming to your house.
Well, we'll see. But do I go to 10-2 straight after
I like
10?
10-2.
Is it worth?
Nice little game.
It's so. Do you know what 10-2 feels like? A sort of K-pop version of Final Fantasy X.
It's so like, that is the problem. Like, in that it's like so silly that people are like, how dare they do this with Final Fantasy X? But like, take it for what it is. It's a nice little time.
Yeah, it's just.
I mean, it sounds like I'm not going to have the affinity by the end with 10 that I probably
I
might
don't know,
enjoy
10 like,
for
there's
being
some
that weird.
wonkiness with like what ends up being the final boss and the final act, but 10 is a really good ending that might get you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
It's a brilliant ending.
Look, I'll hold out. I guess we'll see where we are next week.
Also, the thing that's cool about 10-2 as well, Mark, is that it's actually fronted by 3 female characters. Final Fantasy up to that point never done that before.
Most franchises.
Yeah.
Most franchises still haven't done that.
That is cool.
Yeah. And they do it. Do you know what Final Fantasy? And I don't know if this is an apt comparison, Garrett, because you may have like dabbled more into these games. Final Fantasy X-2 is the closest Final Fantasy will ever come to being a Yakuza game in terms of the wackiness.
I enjoy that game. It's very silly.
Yeah,
like it has a job system, but you change the jobs by changing clothes and dresses.
Outfits. Yes. Exactly, like you can full on like change your entire outfit going into battle, and that way then signified what that character is able to do in that battle as well, which I think is cool.
The one last question I was going to have for you two as well is like, is this the last like what I guess feels like a traditional Final Fantasy game?
Like 12 is like a single player MMO.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid, but it has Final Fantasy elements. Like that's not completely gone. But the way you move around the environment and the way that you battle, like it's not an encounter-based thing anymore. It's a thing is on battlefield. You walk up to it and you start fighting kind of game.
Maybe I'll just
because like 1 to 10, there is like an idea of a Final Fantasy game, and then all of the ones after that are just different. They're just completely different games from each other. There is no consistency anymore.
But 12 also has Baltier, who is very fucking cool.
That game is Star Wars.
He is.
Like, there's Fran is Chewbacca, and Vaughn is Luke Skywalker. Like, it is literally Star Wars. Like, to the degree that 16 is Game of Thrones, 12 is just Star Wars. You're literally like sky pirates on your sky pirate ship that might as well be the Millennium Falcon.
I do like sky pirates.
Yeah, Balthier is like the ultimate gentleman sky
he's
pilot.
Han Solo. Like, he's literally Han Solo.
He's Han Solo, but
British.
like British, like, but not like,
worse.
Colonial British, like cool. Just actually really fucking cool, Baltier. By miles the coolest character in that game. And yeah, instead of the Force, we have spheres. That's the difference.
Anyway, that's your Final Fantasy segment for this week.
Let's do a whistle-stop tour of the news before we get the fuck out of here. Garrett, on the corporations beat this week, Tesco, they're getting out of the physical game market.
Which disappoints me because they never sold anything. You could see anytime you went into their game section, nothing ever moved. But on the flip side of that, if you went in there when they were trying to clear their stock, they would have some dirt cheap deals. Yeah. And sadly, they're just like, we never sell anything. So UK giant Tesco will end its sale of boxed video games. That's according to a report from GameIndustry.biz, which states that shelf space dedicated to video games will be dropped from all of its chain's 2,800 stores. The firm is blaming the rise of digital game sales and will continue to stock digital point cards. So yeah, no more physical games. It's an inevitability. Physical games are going away or becoming a very, very niche product from like limited run games, stuff like that. And we will eventually reach a point where like Tesco, obviously all they sold was like Call of Duty or FIFA or like the big hits.
That's what's interesting about it is like it was one of the places where mom and dad knew they could pick up FIFA and Call of Duty for Christmas.
Yeah, while getting the Christmas shop, you could grab some of the presents. Now you have to go to Smith's GameStop isn't here anymore. So just Smith's in Ireland, I guess. So
even though a lot of the kids and stuff are getting digital and a lot of us as adults are getting digital and stuff like that, it's interesting that the loss of now in the same year, the two most convenient places parents knew they could get video games in, it'll make like a bit of an awkward Christmas, I think, for them.
Just everyone will just go on Amazon.
Yeah, you are overestimating how much parents understand about the internet. Because I speak to parents of teenagers every day, Jack, and they don't use Amazon.
But they're only like 10 years older than us.
I know they are, Jack.
Like,
you would be
parents
shocked.
That is a significant amount of time when it comes to technology.
You would be shocked at how little they know about getting stuff online.
You're kidding me.
I'm not.
Like,
I'm not. The vast majority of parents I deal with on a daily basis do not interact with commerce online whatsoever.
Blimey.
I don't know when it happened though exactly, because like I used to work in a supermarket that had a game section, and it wasn't like the biggest store, but I remember there would be like the Wii U when that came out. There was a section for that. There was the PS3. There's the Xbox 360. I remember buying Remember Me on the PlayStation 3, which is a game that, ironically, no one fucking remembers. Like, you know, a proper like double A tier style, sort of midway acclaim style game that you would never in this fucking day and age see on a shelf in a Tesco. And I can't remember when it was exactly, but I went into, it was a fairly big like Tesco store, and just been like, there's nothing here besides FIFA and GTA, and I was like, that's it.
Well, there's an interesting stat here that like of the June's 4 biggest games, which is Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 16, Street Fighter 6, and Formula 123, less than 18% were sold via physical copies. We're down that low now.
Like, I know it's obviously coming. I didn't realize it was that even like degree now.
PS4 generation, I think most of the stats were like it's like 50-50. And I think there has just been the thorough tipping point at this stage where it's like everything is digital now, and it is the exception to get physical games.
We're kind of 50-50 on this cast, aren't we? Because I know Dave and Mark, you both still buy physical games.
I buy physical when it's one of the two extremes. Either a game I'm going to want to hold on to forever, and I'd like the idea of having a physical box copy of something, or if it's something I know I'm going to play for so short a time, I'd like to trade it in and be rid of it.
Or lose
to be honest,
in your office.
To be honest, I do think
Pokemon Snap. If only it had stayed lost.
Looking at those 4 games, though, I feel like this month might be a bit of an outlier, because Diablo 4 is the sort of thing that people will be playing for years to come. So you're not going to trade that in. So you might as well buy digital.
It's also a
Street Fighter 6
adult audience for Diablo. You know what I mean?
That's Street Fighter 6 is the same thing. F1 23 sports games, they lose their value within a couple of months, where they're worth like nothing anyway. So really, like Final Fantasy 16 is the only one that you would kind of actively think about trading in. So maybe June is a bit of an outlier.
What games this year do you think people are buying physically? I think people who are collectors might get Zelda, but I'd imagine the stats for Zelda are probably like at least 70% digital.
I think what's left, like by and large, like I think
it's whatever's on like the top 10 end of the year list. That's what people are buying physically. The rest, they're not.
Yeah. And again, it's the people who are buying it are the parents I described, not like the people like us who are, you know, clued in, or the kids that are a bit more tech savvy. Because I think like most times of the year, even with the kids whose parents don't have a clue, it's the kid is explaining the process and buying it maybe on the store.
And but like the kid is only buying it physically because they don't have access to buying it digitally.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like it comes down to like birthdays and Christmases are the ones where like the purchasing is just like going to be a bit awkward for a lot of parents because they won't be able to do it solo, you know? It was like last year I could have actually started putting out billing hours for the amount of parents that came in and asked me how to buy this thing in this place for their kids.
Oh man, I did not know that previous generation was that.
Yeah, if you're like 10 years away from like the people like we grew up with the internet, we were probably like maybe a few people like 3 or 4 years older than you guys, because I'm much younger than you guys because I'm not old yet. but like
the Chad
but the people who are like just a few years older than you did not grow up with the internet, so all of it is like learned as an adult.
I'd say anything above about 5 years older than us, in my experience, is where
it's a dramatic shift.
You guys not learn though.
Yeah, especially people who like. I think it also skews along class lines, because I also think people who like didn't spend their 20s consuming media because they were out fucking working or like raising families also didn't have the time to fucking like, get to grips with this shit, because they're like, I've got real shit to do, I got bills to pay.
Yeah, it's such a like there is such like it's a legitimate generational divide between people who are only like 3 or 4 years apart.
Yeah,
just depending on when you were born.
Multiple times from parents who are not that much older than me, like again, like 5 to 7 years older than me, will say the words, I'm not going to put, like even for Netflix, I'm not going to put my credit card into a computer. I don't trust that kind of stuff.
Oh my god.
And that is hugely widespread. Like that is.
But people not learn though. Here's the thing, like,
why should they? They never had to. Because up until this year, they were able to buy all their games physically. So obviously they didn't, Jack, because they're living their lives without knowing this.
Just on the games thing, like just on the games thing.
No, they're adults that don't have this computer literacy. So obviously they've gotten this far without knowing, because they can.
Yeah, because somebody around them, if they ever need to use a computer.
Yeah, and like, the world largely still accommodates them. Like for the moment, we're still in that shift away from. Yeah, like if you have a problem with your billing for your bins, you can fix it online, or there's still a number you can call.
Yeah. Like there's very few parts of life they can't still navigate. Yes, it's much easier, and yes, in the version of life that the four of us live, and a lot of people like us live, it was like, how would you not know this? But like, again, a lot of people are still paper bills people, pay over the phone people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what? Absolutely. Yeah.
Cash is king.
People actually pay their bills.
I like this. You're having a real awakening to what the world is still actually
genuinely
like. This is what like most.
Why anyone would do
most
that.
Working class people. I like.
Pretty much anyone 40 and up.
Yeah. Are still like this.
Is it an Ireland thing?
It's not.
Because
I think it's just a generational thing. It's again people who grew up with the internet versus people who didn't.
Yeah.
I am shocked that anyone would still be paying their bills over the
probably
phone.
Not over the phone, but like literally paper bills, take it down to the post office, like, pay it that way.
Post offices still have the facilities to pay electricity bills and stuff like that.
What?
Yeah.
People going into a physical building to pay their bills.
In
2023.
It's so common, Yeah.
What? Why though?
Because.
Why would you make it this much difficult
because
for
that's
yourself?
What they've always done. It's not difficult to them. Learning how to do it online is the difficult part to them, because they don't already have those skills that we grew up with. So learning it's like learning a foreign language when you don't already have it.
But we had to learn.
But we were digital natives. Yeah, we grew up
digital.
with it.
We were the first generation of digital natives. Like, so we didn't. It was always around us. We don't remember a time where you couldn't pay bills online. It's always the way we've been able to do it. So it's completely. Thing, right? It's such an alien experience to people, like we said, that little bit older than us.
I'm just surprised that people wouldn't try and make things easier for themselves.
I think what you're missing out, what you're missing is that they don't see it as being hard for themselves. They don't see the process by which they do things as hard for themselves. It's just the way it has been done, and it will always be done.
It's convenient for them, especially relative to learning something that is like
literally another language.
Yes.
I think what it is, Jack, is it's not you, it's the old people that are out of touch.
It's not me, it's the old people.
So Tesco have stopped selling physical games is the point we're getting at here.
I gotta cut off the last one, but Mark, round us off with the actually no, I was gonna go to Jack with this. I don't know why I wrote Mark there, because Last of Us is more your bag, Jack.
Why am I a Last of Us guy? I don't even like Last of Us that much. I'm sorry, Barry. No, not really.
Okay, I'm fucking reading it. The first episode of the second season of The Last of Us has been written.
Just got it open.
Showrunner and series co-creator Craig Mazin confirmed work on the second season of the show has begun, although production was halted due to the ongoing writers' strike. Mazin told Deadline that we know what the whole season is.
Yeah, there's a whole video game there. It's quite easy to know what the season is.
Spoilers.
and I was actually able to get a write and submit the first episode right before the deadline hit. In addition, Mazin stated that The Last of Us Part 2 writer Hallie Gross has joined the team for the show's second season. Yeah, I guess we're kind of like... everything's on hold at the moment, so...
Like, I don't consider that newsworthy, because it's not like they're just going to air Season 2, Episode 1. Like, they're going to have to, regardless of when it finishes, they're going to have to wait till all the episodes are finished.
If they get really starved for content, maybe they'll break it up into like 5-minute segments.
I would love that.
Quibi, bring back Quibi.
In the current situation, they can have it written all they want. There's no actors.
Yep.
That's also true,
what
yeah.
What the fuck are they going to do now?
Oh, dear.
It's
like one of those things where the writers and all the actors are on strike, so anything involving writing or acting is like, is this news? Is this news? I guess it's news.
Have you seen how they get like influencers to do all the stuff that they'd normally get actors?
Get Seth Rollins to play every role.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my God, that
Jesus.
interview this week. Did you see that, Jack?
Oh, was it Seth Rollins said something along the lines of like the less content there is out there for people that watch the more they'll watch the WWE?
It's pretty cool that we're not in a union because it means we don't. We.
Oh, did he actually say it like that? Jesus, what an insane lack of self-awareness that man has.
That's his gimmick.
It just, yeah. I don't know. I also saw this week there was something about like outside the Warner Bros. Studios or whatever. There's a whole bunch of trees that they had trimmed like the bare bones, so there was no shade for the strikers as they were walking underneath. There was like no protection from the sun or anything. Which, by the way, if you weren't aware, there's a big old heat wave going on at the moment.
That's just
just
like that's
real
dirty
scummy
tactics.
Yeah, it's
horrible.
real fucking awful.
Yeah, nasty. Yeah. What? And yet Garrett was happy to defend the same executives that would chop down the trees.
It's very important to prune trees for their own good for reasons probably related to global warming of some sort. They get a really hard time.
Oh, you say prune.
Is prune the trees your like metaphor for cutting actors off?
You just gotta prune the trees.
You never grew a tree without pruning a few branches, did you?
Prune a few writers off this tree.
And I've seen so many fucking, like, you know, the typical bad faith actors talking about, oh, look at this millionaire striking and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you have to know when you say that. You have to be aware
you are a prick.
that makes up. Well, that also that we're talking like such a significant, like minute percentage of people that are in that bracket compared to everyone fucking else that's making barely enough to get by and the conditions that they're under.
But it's the same. Yeah. It's the same argument that gets brought up every time anyone strikes ever about anything. And you know where it comes from. Like, it's coming from somebody whose interest is making sure that no one has any sympathy for it. But like, you know, back when like train drivers will strike in the UK and they're doing it
back when? You mean it's still currently going?
Oh yeah, there's a strike this weekend. But like, you know, previous to that, if it was like the train drivers are striking because, you know, like people who are on trains, like the train guards or whatever, who are paid like dirt minimum wage and abused by like drunken fucking Chelsea fans on the way back from Liverpool or whatever, you know, like those people are the people that are just, you know, having their jobs cut back or like reduced on the trains. And like there's always reasons, and then people always go to like, oh, but top level train drivers get like 60k. It's like, yeah, but what about the poor 18-year-old motherfucker who's earning like 20k, you know, trying to tell a drunken bloke who's singing about Didier Drogba to get back in his seat? You know, where's the solidarity for these people? It's
I also think, like, you mentioned the UK, and I think one of the particularly grim things this week was remembering that because of the Tories and their lovely anti-strike laws, SAG-AFTRA members in the UK are not allowed strike. Because their incomes are not protected under British strike laws, which is good. Good, makes you feel good inside, deep down inside.
Love the UK, great place.
So I feel like that's going to be one of the pivots, maybe, that if it's still a stalemate, is to try and go where strikes don't happen and produce things.
Well, they are genuinely building not 2 miles from my house and about 3 miles from where the WWE UK Performance Center was as well, by the way, if anyone's interested. A fucking gigantic studio lot, like huge, like proper Hollywood size, gonna have like 10, 12 sound studios and like a commissary and like studio tours and everything, like just on a patch of ground near the M25, which is like London Orbital Road.
One of the things I mean,
there is no money left in the UK apparently, so they got to get the income from somewhere.
Might end on a wrestling note is one of the things the SAG-AFTRA people have been doing a lot is to show how little they earn relative to like these executives and stuff. They've been posting like videos of them opening residual checks for work they've been on, particularly when it comes to streaming services, and it just reminded me of the story Lance Storm once told, that he got like a residual, like what he thought was gonna be a fat residual check in for like some big DVD or pay-per-view that he'd been a part of that was now out on DVD, and I think his residual check was like 27 cents.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, because the sort of thing where it actually costs more to address the envelope, fucking the Frank the Mail send it the check than it does for them to just actually get paid. Like the studios are spending more money on sending the check out than the actual check they're giving the actor. Or
one of the things, one of the like conditions they're looking at kind of trying to change, and that I guess I
paying them for
I guess I had known it was a thing in Hollywood, but never really put the pieces together on it, was the idea of the self-tape interview. The self-tape interview is something that a lot of actors bought into because it sounds like a great idea. It's like, oh, I don't have to like get in a car, go down to central casting, like for all this hassle only to not get a job. But now the way they've done it with self-tapes is, firstly, like the self-tape thing was like getting out of hand, where it was mostly self-tapes now are happening, and there was this one-upsmanship between actors that weren't earning a living yet, where what ended up happening was people were renting out spaces to do home-taped auditions. So what essentially happens, what it boils down to, is the cost of the audition process is now zero on the part of the studio and entirely on the part of actors who are not remunerated for it all. They have to pay hundreds of dollars to interview for jobs statistically they will not get.
Yeah, and then presumably then have to learn like how to edit and fucking
or pay even more money to have like some fly-by-night studio to do it for them, Yeah. That's a real bummer. And that's just one of those kinds of stories that are really like coming to light now, that, like I said, that information is out there, and like when you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, like I knew self-tape interviews were a thing, but I hadn't put the pieces together that obviously like the reason that studios are super into this is because they have to pay much less. And it's like, no, like the amount of money like compared to what these studios earn that it would cost to do like a proper rigorous casting process is negligible. You know what I mean? And I think one of the actors who was doing a video on this was talking about, like, if you want top tier talent, like fucking pay for it.
Yeah. Like someone put up a graph of just, studio expenditure on, just basic workers who work in studios, not even necessarily jobbing actors, and actual studio profits. And just you see the expenditure on people like either stay the same or shrink, and you see the profits grow just year upon year upon year.
Well, you see the CEO salary usually.
Well, no, but we're talking about like stripping executive level pay out of this, Mark. Like, if you looked at total pay, that's the thing, and that's probably the graph you would publish if you were like Universal or something. You see like this total pay increasing, but if you take executive salaries out of that and you just look at like what they're paying regular people, like there's barely any movement in it whatsoever. Yet the profits will increase like sort of like double digits % every single year for like the last decade or something. It's very annoying that people aren't in solidarity with the
same old story with these soulless corporations that Garrett loves so goddamn much, isn't it?
Yeah, if only Garrett wasn't such
That's the tipping point. That'd end the strike.
They just have to answer to shareholders. They need growth. It's really hard on them.
Growth, synergy, other words.
Dividends.
If I hear Keir Starmer say one more time he's planning to grow the economy, I'm gonna crash a plane into Westminster.
Oh, well, now that's on tape.
Fucking Guy Fawkes the
I think
second
this is
over
where the
here.
chilling Netflix music comes in, and there's like talking heads of us going, we didn't think you'd actually do it. But
And then he
motherfucker,
did it. And then it just cuts to me and Dave just
it was the
pissing
strangest
ourselves.
end all-in weekend I could have ever imagined. On that note,
Oh, Mark.
yeah,
And on that note, yeah.
draw close
Mark.
to Link to the Cast for this week. Thanks for listening in whatever way you have. Follow us on Twitter at Link to the Cast. It's where you need to keep up with the shows as they're posted. Chat to us about what you thought about things on the show, what you think we should be watching and covering. Individually, I'm at The Day to Dave, Mark is at Lithium Project, Jack is at Jack Lazell, and Garrett is at Garrett Kidney. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of Link to the Cast. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.